I'm Steve, and my wife's Kate. We've been married for more than 3 years. The first year was really happy, the second was good, and the third had some issues. It might seem silly or childish. I can't say I disagree, but I'm not sure if you would react differently. We were in the middle of an argument. We've had a lot of those lately, Kate and I, but this one was really bad. I don't even know what it was about. Something small like the laundry or an unpaid bill. Kate has this habit of bringing up irrelevant complaints during arguments, things that have nothing to do with what we're fighting about. It could be stuff from years ago, like when I didn't pick up her sister from a party, or just random things that occurred to her to hit me with. This was one of those times. And you just never stop talking. Do you know that, Steve? She said this in a harsh tone. Nothing makes you happier than the sound of your own voice. Even when we're relationships, you never stay quiet. There was silence. Kate must have seen from my face that she went too far. I was hurt, so I just looked at her. I thought about saying I had no idea my talking during closeness bothered her. It's how I express my love and excitement. But then I decided not to say anything. Kate continued, saying my talking distracts her during closeness and turns her off. I was surprised. Why hadn't she mentioned this before? We've been married for over 3 years, and I thought she enjoyed my affectionate words. She talked less than I did in bed, but she always said a few words. After a long silence, I stood up and told Kate I'd try to only speak when it's important. Then I left the room. Update. I wasn't proud of my actions afterward. All I can say is I felt really hurt. The unexpected argument hit me hard. I thought if she wanted silence, then she would get silence. Our fights were getting worse. Despite still loving Kate, we found it harder to be content with each other. There were fewer happy times and more tense moments and arguments over small things. A major issue was my job as a sales rep for a plumbing supply company, requiring me to travel for about 3 minutes, 4 days a month. Kate didn't like me being away so much, but she knew this before we got married. She also wanted to start a family, which I resisted for another 2 years. I expected a promotion that would let me stop traveling. I just didn't want to have a baby until I could be home all the time. So, those were the big issues. Lately, even tiny things seemed to trigger fights. The reservoir of love and goodwill seemed almost empty, and I didn't know why. One thing Kate said kept bothering me, that my talking during closeness was the opposite of what turned her on. Did that mean she was enjoying closeness with someone else? Someone who didn't talk? It seemed far-fetched until I thought about it more. During my last trip, about 10 days earlier, I couldn't reach her on the phone twice. The second time, she had her cell phone switched off when she should have been back from work. The next day, she said she went for a beer with friends, which seemed reasonable, except I called the house about 10:30, and she was still out. Also, in the past month, 3 times I answered the phone, and the person hung up. Not a big deal, but it rarely happened before. So, I got more suspicious and took action. For the next 2 weeks, Kate probably thought she was living with a mute. No small talk, no idle conversation, no words unless absolutely necessary. Instead of saying, "Could you pass the salt, honey?" I got up and got it myself. In response to, "What's the weather going to be like today?" I passed her the weather page of the newspaper. If she asked me to make dinner that night, all she got was, "Okay." When she left for work and said, "Goodbye, honey," I gave her a smile and a wave. It became a game to see how few words I could say to her in a day. Kate knew I was angry and hurt, and she knew why. At first, she didn't seem to care much, but after that, she started trying to make up. She didn't exactly apologize. That was rare in our house, but she became much more affectionate. Kisses greeted me in bed in the morning, on the way out for work, and at bedtime. Sometimes, she leaned over to give me a hug while I was reading the paper over coffee in the morning, or rubbed my shoulders while we were watching TV. It was a funny thing, even as my anger gradually calmed down, and nobody can stay white-hot angry. Over days, I kept saying as little as possible before speaking. I'd ask myself if I really needed to say it, and usually the answer was no. I was listening more, observing more, and keeping my thoughts to myself. About 10 days after the argument, Kate suggested we make love. Whether she wanted to or it was part of making up, I couldn't tell. After dinner, during which she told me some stories about work, and I spoke no more than 6 minutes, 8 words, she stood up and took me by the hand, urging me to leave the dishes for later. With a big, warm smile, She conveyed that there was something else she needed at that moment. As she led me back to the bedroom, I wondered if the distance between us had grown because of my silence, or if I was silent because we had already drifted so far apart. During the entire encounter, I hadn't uttered a word. As we coupled smoothly, easily, and familiarly, I remained completely silent, feeling a sense of unnatural coldness and distance. I wasn't even sure if it was what Kate truly wanted, but after that argument, I had no intention of saying a word. After we finished, I rolled off her, and she snuggled into me, emitting a happy without any verbal communication. We relaxed together for a while, still without exchanging any words. I couldn't discern what the experience had been like for her. For me, it felt cold and empty, and whether that was due to the silence or the growing distance between us remained uncertain. Update. After a few more days of minimal conversation, Kate became upset with me. One night during dinner, she expressed frustration, questioning my silence and whether I had anything to say. After a moment of thought, I responded that I thought this was what she wanted. She clarified, explaining that she desired a husband who communicates and shares feelings, not someone resembling a mannequin from a department store. Privately, I chuckled, thinking, "Good one, Kate." Last week she had complained about me talking too much, so I'm making an effort to rectify that. Kate accused me of taking the silent treatment too far, labeling it the Silent Sam routine. I looked at her for a moment before speaking. Some of my confusion was intended to annoy her, and partly I was genuinely puzzled. I honestly didn't know what she wanted. First, I talked too much, then too little. How am I supposed to know what to do now? She glared at me, clearly very angry, insisting that I stop and be the man she married. I regretted my earlier words, stating that she doesn't talk too much. We were arguing, I was upset, and I just threw that at her again. After a pause, I added, "All right, Kate, but I have to admit your words got me thinking that maybe I do talk too much, or without thinking first about whether I really have anything to say." After a moment, I smiled at her, saying, "In a way, all this has been helpful." She smiled back warmly, her anger seemingly gone, and for a moment, I felt the closeness between us that had been missing. I then brought up the topic of making love, genuinely seeking to understand. I asked if she meant what she said about not talking during closeness. Rather than answering my question, Kate left the table for the rest of the evening. She gave me the cold shoulder, which didn't seem fair. Despite my honest attempt to understand her feelings, the next morning brought a more hopeful atmosphere. Kate had stepped back from her initial attack, expressing a desire for communication. Unfortunately, her focus remained on the end of the conversation, evident in her glares and tight-lipped phrases at breakfast. We endured a few more days of minimal communication, ironic this time, as she was giving me the silent treatment. After 3 to 4 days, Kate's mood drastically changed again. She came home from work looking very upset and headed straight for the shower. Over dinner, she was distracted, saying little and frequently losing track of my conversation. This wasn't the angry silent treatment anymore. She was clearly preoccupied with something. But when I asked her if something was wrong, and I asked several times, she only mentioned a problem at work. I noticed, though, that she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. Unsure of what was bothering her, I decided to wait and see. The next day, I received a call at work. Ernie Matazzolo confirmed my suspicions about Kate having an affair. I thanked him, left work, and went home. Looking at the photos, the only surprise was the guy, Adam, who hadn't been my best man, but was one of my groomsmen. He had always admired Kate, and I'd never considered him a threat. I felt cold and empty, like the last time Kate and I were in bed together. I sat for a long time, contemplating everything, and pulled out the photos, finding them unchanged from the first time I put them away. Update. When Kate arrived home, she found me seated on the couch, seemingly idle. I remained quiet as she greeted me, my expression crafted to appear neutral rather than angry. Her inquiry about my unusual behavior grew more pointed, a blend of concern and annoyance evident in her edgier tone. As she probed further, sensing that something was amiss, I maintained my silence. Frustration welled within her as she pressed for an explanation, insinuating a return to the silent treatment of the past. In response, I sat up, cutting through the tension with a direct question. I asked her how long she had been dating him. "Kate, taken aback, recoiled in shock and retreated a step. Perplexed, she took a seat across from me, seeking to understand my accusation. Her attempts to read my expression proved futile. The atmosphere thickened as she continued to deny any involvement with someone else. Clasping her hands tightly in her lap, she implored me to reveal the source of my accusations. Her plea, laden with frustration, suggested that I harbored a guilty conscience. Unyielding, I presented an envelope containing a photograph, a damning image of Kate on Adam's bed. She looked at it briefly, dropped it in surprise, and recoiled as though it were a threat. Blushing, she retreated into her chair, avoiding eye contact. In the face of my persistent silence, she decided to change the subject, heading for the bedroom. However, I intercepted her with the incriminating photo. She hesitated, and unable to escape my unrelenting gaze, she finally met my eyes with a silent plea. "How long?" I reiterated. Her response was a withdrawal into herself, arms wrapped tightly around her as she shook her head. The silence lingered, and she eventually appealed to me, requesting that I spare her from discussing the matter. Declaring my decision to leave, I moved towards the bedroom to pack. In a desperate plea, she implored me to wait, promising to disclose everything. Relenting, I resumed my seat, observing her as she struggled to maintain eye contact. Unable to endure the silence, she confessed, apologizing and expressing remorse. As she pleaded with me not to leave, I remained seated, meeting her gaze with an unwavering expression. She averted her eyes, and after a moment, she mustered the courage to look back at me, tearfully admitting that Adam had told her I was also involved. Surprised, I refrained from questioning her and gestured for her to continue. Kate explained that a month earlier, she had encountered Adam at the supermarket. He, being charming and friendly, had offered her companionship in my absence, arriving at our house with pizza and wine. They spent a casual evening together, misled by Adam's claim that I, too, was engaged in similar actions. Towards the end, he started acting worried and concerned. When Kate questioned him about it, he claimed I had been unfaithful. He did an impressive job at acting, appearing reluctant with his head hanging, avoiding eye contact with me. According to him, you and he had a conversation a couple of weeks earlier where you confessed about a girl you were involved with during your trips. He provided convincing details about her appearance, where you met, and how great you said she was in bed. I started crying, and Adam consoled me, expressing admiration for my beauty and handsomeness. He couldn't fathom how any man could cheat on me and vowed to do anything to make me feel better. A little while later, we ended up in bed together, and I only found out yesterday that the entire story was false. I waited, expressionless. She continued, her expression now more somber than before. I found myself in his apartment, having shared in relationships moment. With a smug demeanor, he brought up the notion that if it weren't for Steve's involvement with Julia, we wouldn't have realized how well we connect. I raised the issue of inconsistency, reminding him that during our initial conversation about your lover, he had mentioned the name Joanne. He couldn't recall any of the details, like her appearance or how you met. Frustrated, I screamed at him to tell me the truth. "Did you really cheat on me?" He laughed, admitting it was just a story to get in my pants. Kate's face turned red with anger. I angrily got up, threw on my clothes, and berated him, calling him out for making a fool out of me. He lay there, smiling, unapologetic or remorseful for his actions. I couldn't believe what I had done, and suddenly she couldn't speak, sobbing with her face in her hands and her body heaving. The urge to comfort Kate was overshadowed by a cold emptiness. Was she truly that naive, or had our love deteriorated to the point where she was willing to believe even the most absurd stories? Then there was my rage at Adam, a friend of 15 years. I sat in silence while Kate sobbed. After about 5 minutes, I stood up. Kate watched me fearfully. I took her cell phone from her purse, put it in my pocket, and went to the bedroom and kitchen, unplugging the phones and putting them in a bag under my arm. Before departing, I glanced back at Kate and conveyed that I would return. I instructed her not to leave and cautioned against engaging in conversations with anyone. Despite my quiet tone, she appeared terrified and affirmed my instructions with a nod. Update. On the way to Adam's, I focused on controlling my breath to appear calm and friendly. When Adam opened his door, he seemed surprised and nervous. Without hesitation, I invited him for a couple of beers and suggested watching the Phillies since Kate was at a meeting. Though he observed me carefully, he put on a friendly demeanor and agreed to my proposal. We sat in his living room, chatting amiably while the game played in the background. Keeping the conversation light, I noticed Adam gradually relaxing, thinking it was a casual visit. However, I remained uncertain about the situation. It took more than an hour to steer the conversation toward closeness. I inquired about the ladies he was dating, making him momentarily nervous, but my reassuring smile prompted him to share details about a girl from work he'd been seeing. Casually, I mentioned a talkative college girlfriend, and Adam took the bait, agreeing that actions speak louder than words during relationships moments. Laughing, he boasted about revealing the desires of many girls, expressing satisfaction. Leaning in, I asked about Kate's preferences, catching him off guard. After a moment of shock, he agreed to be quiet, and I reassured him with a smile. He remained silent, looking at me fearfully. Expressing my disbelief, I confronted him about betraying our friendship and deceiving my wife to have an affair with her. Downplaying it, he claimed it wasn't a big deal, arguing she's just a woman. He trailed off, uncertainly looking at my face. Staring at him in disbelief, I questioned how I had ever been friends with him. Asserting that things were better now, I insisted he tell me everything about his deceitful game with Kate. Having already talked to her, I warned that lying wouldn't work. Wide-eyed and genuinely afraid, Adam nodded at me, signaling his readiness to talk. He recounted the story, aligning closely with what Kate had said. He had always found her attractive and had been flirting with her for several months. Whenever he encountered her, he was single. One week, he bumped into her at the supermarket and saw a chance. Initially thinking he could seduce her, he fabricated a story about my affair when it became apparent she wouldn't cheat on me. He deliberately angered her and made her feel sorry for herself, making it easy to get her into bed. They met about 5 more times, always at his place. The first encounter wasn't great because she was upset about my alleged affair. She cried. However, the subsequent times were fantastic, exactly as he described. When he noticed my disapproval, he abruptly stopped talking. I had cut his hair almost to the roots by then, finding satisfaction in picturing him hiding his head with hats for weeks. Coldly, I inquired if it was over. After a brief hesitation, he admitted it was, and shared that she found out about the fabricated story. Unable to recall the name of the supposed girl I was dating, she got angry and left. I was ready to leave, feeling empty. Although I could have pressed for more details, I decided against it. I informed Adam that our friendship was over, warning against retaliation. We agreed not to involve the police. He nodded, looking more humiliated than angry, and requested to be released. Smiling, I assured him I'd leave the apartment door open, allowing him to free himself in about an hour. I walked away without turning back. Update. Upon my return, Kate was seated on the couch in her bathrobe, her wet hair indicating recent distress. As I moved around the apartment fixing the phones, she remained visibly scared and unhappy. Taking a seat across from her, we exchanged glances, but I maintained my silence. Eventually, she inquired about my actions, to which I explained the conversation with Adam, assuring her that I hadn't resorted to violence and expressing doubt about hearing from him anytime soon. Despite acknowledging that she almost wished I had confronted him physically, she recognized the potential consequences. Troubled, she sought to move past the situation, admitting her foolishness and asking for forgiveness. I looked at her for a prolonged moment before responding, our pattern of saying very little to each other becoming a habit. "I don't know," I finally replied, and it was an honest admission. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began to cry. The following morning, Kate entered the kitchen, expressing delight at the breakfast and coffee set on the table. Her joy faded abruptly upon noticing the 2 large suitcases near the door. Distraught, she questioned my departure, pleading with me not to leave. Instead of leaving without a word, I served her a cup of coffee and persuaded her to sit across from me. "Kate, it's over," I declared. I admitted uncertainty about what had transpired or why, but emphasized that our relationship had deteriorated. Despite acknowledging our initial compatibility, I highlighted a year of impatience, snappiness, and constant fighting. I pointed out that her choice to believe Adam's dubious story about my infidelity and her subsequent actions indicated a departure from the woman I had married. I suggested she must have been on the verge of straying for our relationship to reach this point. Pausing, I waited for her response, but she cried silently, holding her face in her hands. When I ceased speaking, she looked up at me, pleadingly. I offered her an opportunity to speak, to prove me wrong, to outline a path to revive our love. Regrettably, she remained silent, merely gazing at me and crying. I headed to the door, bidding her farewell as I picked up my suitcases and departed.
My wife cheated, got pregnant, and didn't know I knew about the affair. Now she wants open marriage. I stumbled onto the patio armed with a club. Those pesky dogs were rummaging through my trash again, knocking over the dumpster and waking me up. It was the third time this week, and I'd had enough. Why couldn't people keep their dogs at home? Though I knew they were just hungry, my annoyance lingered. Quietly unlatching the back gate, I approached the trash bins to confront them. Two figures stood beside the toppled container. As I swung the gate open, they spotted me, pleading for mercy, explaining they were just hungry kids. Surprised, I brought them into the backyard under the security lights. They were ragged and dirty, dressed in oversized clothes and baseball caps, shivering in the chilly air. Demanding if they had tipped over my trash, one confessed, promising they wouldn't do it again. Not satisfied, I led them inside, directing them to the bathroom and instructing them not to come out until I said so. Gathering some clean clothes and towels, I returned to find them attempting to escape through the window. Surprised to realize they were girls, I urged them into the shower, providing soap and shampoo. After a brief exchange, I left them to clean up and headed to the kitchen. Sorting through the fridge, I prepared plates of cold fried chicken, potato salad, veggies with sauce, pastrami sandwiches, pickles, and chips. Setting the table for their meal would make for a pretty good dinner, I mused. I hoped they'd enjoy the monster cheese, mayo, and mustard on their sandwiches. The bathroom door opened quietly, and a whisper drifted to the kitchen. A minute later, two of the most stunning girls I'd ever seen entered, with long dark black hair, olive skin, and the greenest eyes, slightly almond-shaped, high cheekbones, and the cutest little noses. They were a sight to behold. They seemed to be in their teens, maybe 11 or 12. It was amusing to see them in Brianna's clothes. She's tall and they were tiny, with sleeves and trouser legs rolled up. They resembled tramps. "Take a seat," I offered. "Want cola, juice, milk?" They both opted for milk. "I'm McKay North," I introduced myself, pouring the milk. "Who are you?" "I'm Maggie," said the taller one. "Short for Margaret. This is Stokely. Can we really finish it all?" "Have more if you want," I said. "I'll cook in the morning, but not at 2 a.m. "No, that's fine, thanks," Stokely replied. Maggie eyed me suspiciously. "What do you want from us? We're not up to anything." I chuckled. "Same here. If you're after my virtue, you'll be disappointed." They didn't quite grasp my humor. "I'm not interested in little girls," I clarified. They weren't fans of the label, but they started eating voraciously. "Slow down," I advised. "Chickens, no need to bolt. The chickens are dead, and the potatoes were never fast runners. You'll get a stomachache." They chuckled, eating more moderately. "Where do you live?" "There's an empty house down the block," Maggie explained. "We found a mattress and something to cover up with, but we're worried about hopheads moving in once they realize it's vacant." "Want a warm bed tonight?" I offered. They eyed me skeptically. "Not mine," I clarified. "I've got 3 spare bedrooms, well, technically mine too, but you get the idea." They chuckled nervously. "We've got no money," Stokely admitted. "We can't pay." "I'm not asking for payment," I reassured. "Why are you doing this?" she queried. "Why be so kind?" "Mac, call me Mac," I corrected. "Everyone does." "I'm just a good guy, not trying to be cute," I explained. "Ask my mom." This brought smiles. I liked it. I decided to make it a regular thing. "I'd want someone to be kind to me if I were in your shoes," I mentioned. They seemed to mull it over. "Can I snag some of these chips?" Stokely inquired. I passed her the bag and they both reached in while munching on their sandwiches. I finished mine and they seemed eager for more. I poured another glass of milk for each of them and they drank it down. I was amazed as they cleared off their plates and devoured all the vegetables down to the last crumb. They must have been famished. "Time for bed," I informed them. "You each have your own bathroom. Toothbrushes, combs, and such are in there. There's aspirin, stomach medicine, toothpaste, and floss in the first aid kits. If you need anything else, just ask." "Can we lock the doors?" Maggie asked. "Sure, but if I need you to, you'll have to unlock them promptly," I explained. They eyed me oddly, a realization dawning in Maggie's vivid green eyes. "He's worried we'll swipe something," she explained to her sister. "We won't, Mac. It's okay if you don't fully trust us. We're not entirely trusting you either." I chuckled. Fair enough. Mutual distrust it is. Soon enough, you'll find you can trust me. "I hardly ever injure pretty girls," I quipped, eliciting another pair of radiant smiles. I think they appreciated the pretty part. They followed me to their rooms, and I heard the locks click as I returned to bed. I lay awake for a while, pondering what led these girls to this situation. Why were they rummaging through my trash? Why were they alone? Where was their family? I resolved to get some answers in the morning. As I dressed, I heard the floor creaking in the hallway. Opening the door a crack, I spotted them creeping into the living room. Thinking they might be planning to leave, I opened the door wider. "Girls, ready for breakfast?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "Maybe we should just go," Maggie suggested. "You're not going to lock us up or anything, are you?" "You mean make you stay?" I clarified. They glanced at each other again, then back at me, nodding. "No, I won't force you to do anything," I assured. "It's against my principles to compel anyone, but I'd like you to join me for breakfast." They exchanged another look. "Will you let us leave after?" Stokely asked. "If that's what you want," I replied. "Actually, I was hoping you'd spend the day with me, but if you have somewhere else to be, that's fine." "Yeah, we have to meet our stockbroker," Maggie grinned, her eyes lighting up. "What are you making us?" "Actually, what are you making us?" "Are you an English teacher or something?" Maggie teased. "As a matter of fact, yes," I confirmed. "I teach English Lit at the university." "Cool," Stokely remarked. "We don't go to school, too busy." "But you're having breakfast now, aren't you?" I pointed out. "I was thinking waffles with bacon. Do you like that?" They did, so we headed in, and they fetched the waffle iron while I prepared the batter. They made the waffles while I fried up 2 lbs of bacon. I'm a bit of a syrup snob. "And I'm a coffee snob," Maggie added. I had Maggie take charge of the bacon while I ground the coffee beans and fired up the coffee maker. It all came together quite nicely, and we enjoyed real maple syrup with our waffles. They irked me by asking for coffee creamer. "I'm saving some for the barbarians and Brianna who loved the vanilla cake," I quipped. We devoured all the bacon, and they each polished off 3 waffles. "Stick with me, girls, and in a week, you'll be as plump as toads," I joked. They both chuckled, and it was the most delightful sound. Then they guzzled down their milk like hungry calves. My pantry definitely needed restocking. "So, tell me about Maggie and Stokely," I prompted. "What's your story? Why resort to digging through trash for food?" We took our coffee into the living room, and they shared a heartbreaking tale. Their father, once a car mechanic, sank into hard drinks and misused post-unemployment, leaving their lives when they were young. Their mother divorced him, and they lost contact. In a battered Detroit economy, job prospects were slim. Their mother drove a cab, but tragedy struck when she picked up a passenger who fatally stabbed her for her meager earnings. Left to die, they ended up in foster care, enduring molestation from the homeowner before fleeing to live on the streets for 3 months. With the surname Steele, they feared the elements, violence, and hunger, struggling to survive day by day. As they recounted their ordeal, I sat in silence, heart heavy with empathy. How many others faced similar fates? It dawned on me that this was a more prevalent struggle than I'd realized. Could I help them? The idea seemed daunting, as a single man taking in 2 young girls might raise eyebrows and bureaucratic hurdles. They interrupted my thoughts. "Mac, are you married?" Stokely inquired. "I was," I admitted. My ex thought I lacked ambition. She's a high-flying lawyer, worldly and all. Marriage didn't fit into her picture. "What an idiot." Maggie chimed in. I chuckled. "She's actually a good person, no cheating or anything. We're still close friends." We both realized we were too young and naive. "How old are you?" Stokely asked. "I'm 28, I replied. "And you?" "I'm 11 and she's 13, Stokely responded. "What's on the agenda today?" "Well, we're going to chat," I started, "and I'll introduce you to someone." Opening the garage door, a furry blur dashed in. Spotting our guests, he bounded over, leaping onto the sofa and nuzzling into their laps, his big pink tongue lavishing affection. "Meet Granville," I introduced. I affectionately call him Grandma. They erupted into fits of giggles as he showered them with licks. Weighing in at about 130 lbs, he was immovable. I'm certain he outweighed them both. "Lie down, Grandma," I commanded, and he reluctantly obeyed, sprawling across their laps. "He's massive," Stokely chuckled, running her hand over his head. "What kind of dog is he? He looks like a striped tiger." "He's a bull mastiff," I explained. "The pattern is called brindle, which gives him that color." "He looks like he could snap our faces off," Maggie observed. Yeah, he could, but he won't. He's friendly with my pals. He sees you chilling in our house, being friendly, and that's why he adores you. If you were hostile towards me, he'd be on high alert and very defensive. Now that he knows you, he won't tolerate anyone being hostile towards you. If I raise my voice at you, he won't like it. He cares deeply for those he loves. Stokely hopped down and draped herself over him, embracing his neck as he licked her hand. I adore him, she declared. He's so wrinkly and cute. Does he stay in the garage? No, he's an indoor dog, I clarified. Yesterday he got sick, so I put him outside to avoid making a mess in the house. Why was he sick? Stokely inquired. He eats things he shouldn't, like sticks, bugs, and who knows what else. But he seems fine now. Gross, Maggie remarked. He licked my face. Yeah, he's adorable, I admitted. He's my buddy, so I just deal with it. And he'll be your buddy too if you let him. We should take him for a walk, Maggie insisted. I grabbed his leash and Maggie took the lead, but it's more like he leads whoever's holding the leash, so she stayed a few yards ahead of Stokely and me. Getting dragged along. Stokely slipped her little hand into mine. I glanced down at her and she smiled up at me. Man, she was beautiful, I thought. Everything okay? She asked. Absolutely, sweetheart, I assured her. I enjoy holding hands with pretty girls. She blushed faintly but didn't let go. We walked for a couple of miles, and by the time we returned, Grandma was panting and drooling. Despite the cold, he soldiered on. We sipped more coffee and chatted all day. Finally, I broached the subject of helping them. What can you do? Maggie inquired skeptically. Honestly, Maggie, I'm not entirely sure, I admitted. I mentioned I could speak to Brianna. She's a lawyer of a different kind. Maybe she'll have some ideas. Is this the same woman? Maggie asked. Maggie, she's not that, I corrected. Stop calling her that. Do you trust me? They glanced at each other before nodding. Yeah, I guess, Stokely replied. You've been really nice to us. Well, let's give her a call and see if she can make it, I suggested. You'll like her, just give her a chance. Brianna, busy but agreeable, joined us for dinner. Bree, a tall, stunning redhead, she's gorgeous, but she's never realized it. I described her, and I could see the girls were impressed when she arrived. She greeted me with a passionate kiss and embraced both girls. You've replaced me? She teased the girls. No, Breezy, you're irreplaceable. You know that, I joked back. She seemed genuinely pleased. I assured the girls that we were still friends, which we were, friends with benefits. We still shared great closeness together, sometimes once a week or more, with fervent lovemaking during her week-long stays. She simply didn't have time for a husband, and I doubted she'd ever marry again. We cared for each other, but marriage wasn't in the cards for us. As lovers, we got along great, but as spouses, we argued incessantly. So, who are your new friends? She inquired, smiling at them, leaving them starstruck. I'm Maggie, and she's Stokely, Maggie introduced. Nice to meet you, Bree greeted them. You know this guy's dangerous, right? Not to us, Stokely remarked. I think he could be dangerous to someone he's enemies with. He has a club and a very large dog. Bree nudged Grandma with her boot, and he grunted in protest. Hey, big guy. She knelt down and embraced him. Do you miss me? He rolled his eyes but lacked the energy to lift his head. What's on your mind, Mac? She asked. Why'd you want to talk to me? Not that I mind being invited to dinner. He's a fantastic cook, girls, if you can motivate him. I think he cooked lamb chops. We've never had anything like this, Maggie remarked. Well, then I'm in for a treat. But what's the occasion? She pressed. We had dinner, and I explained. We need your help, Breezy, I informed her. We're clueless about legal matters. The girls are orphans. Well, their father might be alive, but no one knows where he is. He abandoned them, and their mother was eliminated. They were in foster care, and some creep started intimidating them. They ran away and are living on the streets. They were rummaging through my trash for food, and I caught them. Now we're trying to figure out a way to keep them off the streets. She studied me for a moment. You want them, don't you? Goodness, Mac, you've always wanted children, and because I didn't give you any, you want them, don't you? I blushed. Yes, I do. I kind of do. What do you think is the best approach, Bree? I don't think it's feasible, she responded. No family court will give you 2 young girls. You're a solitary man. This is a recipe for disaster. They won't approve it. I glanced at the girls, who stared back at me with wide eyes. What's wrong? I inquired. Their gazes met before they broke into tears and rushed to hug me. You really want to keep us with you? Stokely choked out between sobs. I can't believe it. I never thought we'd find anyone. Anyone. She struggled to speak through her tears. I held them close. Yes, girls, I did consider it. You need someone to care for you. I need someone too. I thought maybe we could do it together. Their small bodies trembled as they clung to me. I looked helplessly at Bri as tears streaked down her cheeks. She glanced between the girls and me. Darn it, Mac, look at what you've done to me. Just when I think I've got you figured out, you surprise me. What am I going to do with you? There was a peculiar expression on her face, as if she were seeing me in a new light. Let me think about this for a few days. Girls, you're coming with me. It wouldn't work if you stayed here with Mac. It would ruin everything if anyone found out. Mac, we're taking Grandma with us. I can't leave him here, and he'll have to take care of them. She swept out of the house like a whirlwind, carrying Grandma with her, and drove off in her Mercedes. I'll call you, she promised. She called 3 times for about 30 seconds each over the next 2 weeks. I didn't see her or the girls until she phoned me Friday morning, saying she wanted to meet for dinner at Alfonso's, a charming Italian restaurant in Pontiac where we often dined. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at the bar with men circling around her. As soon as she spotted me, she left them gaping and came over to me. We walked to our booth. She nudged me and sat beside me, which was unusual as she typically sat across from me, indicating something was different. We placed our orders and she remained silent for a while. You know I love you, right, Mac? She finally began. Yes, I love you too, I replied. I don't mean I love your mom or anything like that. I'm in love with you, Mac. I always have been since that day at Cedar Point. You're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love, she confessed. I trust you completely. I love everything about you except being married to you. You know me, I like my freedom. No commitments, no baggage, nothing tying me down. I love my job and my life, but I don't love them any more than I love you. And I don't have to choose. You're as faithful as Grandma. We understand each other. I'm not physically engaged with anyone but you. I've never felt this way before. You've always understood me. That's why what I'm about to propose will sound incredibly strange. I chuckled. Sounds like I'm in for a surprise. She shot me a, you fool look. Yes, you are. Will you marry me, Mac? Bree asked, her voice soft yet determined. I nearly choked on my wine. Choking on wine isn't ideal. When I regained my composure, I sat there dumbfounded. Stop playing around and give me an answer, she snapped. Absolutely not, I finally managed. Why, Bri? We just make each other miserable. We'll be at each other's throats in a month. What's wrong with what we have now? Nothing, she agreed. This isn't about us. It's about the sweetest, most adorable girls on the planet, Mac. I'm head over heels in love with them. You turned my world upside down when you invited me over that night. They're desperate to see you. They cry and beg me every night to come and see you. The problem is, I won't give them up. I've never had as much fun and joy in my life as I have with them. None of us have a stable home life. No judge in their right mind would give them to any of us. But if we were married, they'd grant us custody in a heartbeat. So I need them, and I'll have to take you as part of the deal. If you want them, you'll have to put up with me. Can we make this work, Mac? I doubt it, I told her. You're as troublesome as me. You come home drunk, you're always late for everything except work, and sometimes you don't come home at all or even call. Come on, Bree, we've already been down that road. I know, she sighed. But what if things could be different this time? Her voice softened, pleading. I can't wait to get back home at night now. I always let them know if I'm running late, and ever since they came into my life, I've only been having 1 glass of wine each night. I never imagined I could feel this way. Marry me, Mac. Give us a chance. Her eyes glistened as she looked at me, vulnerability on full display. I think there's something we need to discuss, I interjected. Go ahead. What's on your mind? Are we just going to talk in circles here? Tell me what's on your mind. Do you want me to start? She asked, her fingers playing with the edge of her napkin. I took a long sip of my drink and motioned for another glass of wine from the waiter. Go ahead, I encouraged her. What drives me crazy about you is your need to control everything, she declared. You want to know every detail of my life, where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing, when I'll be home. It's like you're paranoid. If you could just let go and allow me to be myself, maybe we'd still be together. But you'll never be able to do that. It's maddening. Surely you know by now that you're the only person I've ever been interested in. You do know that, right, Mac? Yeah, probably, I admitted. It used to get under my skin. I was afraid you'd find someone else and leave me. That's never going to happen, she assured me. I haven't even thought about another person since the day I met you. Sure, I go out to dinners with clients and colleagues. I hit the dance floor with groups, both men and women. I'm having fun. That's just who I am. But since meeting you, no one has ever come close to touching me lovingly, and they never will. Do you believe me? Yes, I do. It's the same for me. I trust you, Bri. I know you'd never do anything to hurt me. You're just so carefree and independent. I'm as in love with you as I was on our wedding day. I think you feel the same about me, and we were comfortable where we were, I acknowledged. Well, I'm not comfortable with that anymore, she stated firmly. There are two girls who need a family. I love them nearly as much as I love you. I love them more than my job. I want to be a part of their lives, and I can see that can only happen if we do it together. So, will you give me a chance, Mac? Will you marry me and try to love me so we can have this family together? I sat in silence, processing her words. Could I really go down this road again? Was it worth the risk of reopening old wounds? I'll never have children of my own. I'm too vain and selfish for that, Bree continued. But we can take these girls. Marry me, Mac, and I'll do everything I can to make you incredibly happy. Okay, I finally acquiesced. Clearly, you've had time to think about this. Give me some time too, okay? She glanced at her watch. You've got 20 minutes, she informed me. Oh great, so now there's a deadline, I quipped. Yes, they'll be waiting outside in 20 minutes, she confirmed. They should arrive in 10 minutes. They'll walk with Grandma for about 10 minutes, then a car will pick us up to take us to your place. We wrapped up our meal quickly and stepped outside. A limo was waiting, but the girls were still absent. The driver mentioned they were out with the dog, not seeming too pleased about it, perhaps due to potential drool on the upholstery. After a short wait, I spotted them hurrying toward us. Let go, Maggie, Stokely urged as they neared. There's a sketchy guy eyeing us. Grandma's not a fan, he growled. Glancing down the sidewalk, I noticed a young man approaching. He looked about 20, adorned with tattoos and piercings, his attire giving off a wannabe tough guy vibe. What's your deal? He snapped at me. Nothing, we're leaving, I replied. Looks like everything's yours. A fancy jacket, lovely ladies, and a big ride, he remarked. Seems like you're flush with cash. The guy was out of his mind. I towered over him by 8 inches and outweighed him by at least 100 pounds, not to mention lacking his protruding gut. You best be moving along, buddy, I warned. My dog here is not fond of you. Closing in on about 40, he retorted. But I ain't scared of no dog. His hand reached under his jacket to his waistband, revealing a glint of metal. Without hesitation, I delivered a swift kick to his chest, sending him sprawling backward. A weapon tumbled from his waistband to the ground. Startled, Maggie dropped Grandma's leash. As the guy lunged, Grandma shielded his face as Grandma clamped down on his forearm, eliciting a pained yelp and a torn sleeve from his hooded sweatshirt. Up, Granville, I commanded, and he obediently resumed his place beside me. The assailant, now sweating on the ground, gazed up at me as I approached, Grandma at my side. Go ahead, Grandma, I instructed. Grandma lunged forward, his massive jaws closing around the man's neck, freezing him in terror. You're a real piece of work, I spat at him. Got a few screws loose? His head nodded ever so slightly, terror etched on his face. Say it, I demanded. Silence ensued. Bite, Grandma, I urged. A muffled scream escaped the man as blood trickled down his neck, Grandma's powerful jaws sinking into his flesh. Say it, I pressed. I'm a piece of work, he choked out. How much cash you carrying? I interrogated. Handing it over reluctantly, he reached into his pocket, prompting Grandma to tighten his grip. Slowly, I cautioned. When he turned over, he produced a bundle and passed it to me. Release him, Grandma, I ordered. Reluctantly, he obeyed, and the man hastily backed away. I'll give you a 20-yard head start, I warned. After that, he's coming for you. Suggest you make tracks with the speed of a sprinter. The man darted off, but his pants slid down, causing him to stumble. Hastily readjusting, he fled, clutching his trousers with his uninjured hand. I yelled out, "You need a belt." Turning to the girls, I found all 3 of them frozen in astonishment. Swiftly, I kicked the weapon into the storm drain. What's wrong? I asked. Bree was the first to react. You're one tough cookie, Mac. Note to self, never get on your bad side. The girls rushed over to me, and I embraced them. Oh my God, murmured Stokely into my chest. I was scared of that guy, but you handled it like a boss. Thank you. You did this for us, didn't you? Well, no one messes with my girls, I reassured her. He left you a little something for your college fund, I added, handing her the bundle. She counted it. It totaled $700. He must have robbed a few more unsuspecting folks. Later, she split it with Maggie, and we piled into the car. Glancing back, I hugged Maggie and noticed something. A van is pulling up, I remarked. I know, Bree confirmed. It's got some of our stuff. I arched an eyebrow at her. Yeah, I'm aware I tend to take a lot for granted, she chuckled. Girls, Mac addressed them, we're tying the knot again and keeping you with us. They gasped and squealed. Really? Maggie turned to Mac. She's not so bad after all. You were right. We adore Bree. She's been so good to us. We've got heaps of new clothes, and she got us into this amazing school. We'll make you proud, promise. We won't let you down. We know you won't, honey, Bree reassured them. Don't sweat it, she added. I was somewhat stunned. I tried to speak, but the words eluded me. You okay, Mac? Stokely inquired. Bree chuckled. He's not. He goes into full-on panic mode. His perfectly ordered world's turned upside down. His house is always immaculate, everything's in pristine condition. We'll have our underwear hanging in his shower, mix up his books, leave rings on the coffee table. It'll drive him nuts. I honestly don't know how he'll cope with Granville. We'll have to love him so much that crumbs on the table won't bother him. Or can we handle that? I groaned. I never agreed to any of this, I said. Bree's like a hurricane, sweeps us off our feet, turns everything topsy-turvy. Do you love Bree? Stokely asked me. Yes, but from across town, I tried to clarify. But we all need to be together, Maggie chimed in. They all burst into laughter at this, and I couldn't help but join in. It was all so absurd. How did things spiral out of control like this? As usual, Brianna had managed to turn my little mission to help some girls into a full-blown marriage and adoption plan. Small actions can really throw your life off course, I mused. This is a harebrained scheme, I told Bree as we arrived at my house. There was a flurry of activity as movers carried in heaps of belongings and distributed them to various rooms. To my surprise, stacks of women's clothing kept appearing in Maggie's and Stokely's rooms, one after the other. Where'd you girls get all this? I asked Maggie as she hurried past. Bree took us shopping a few times, she said, vanishing into her room. Bree stuck her head out of my room. Gosh, Mac, do you ever get rid of anything? You still have stuff from when we got married. I'm tossing this. I need drawer and closet space. I rushed to rescue my school jacket with letters from the trash heap. Cut it out, Brianna, I shouted. These things can't be thrown away. If I didn't want it, I wouldn't have it. This is my home, and I'll boot your skinny rear out if you don't quit. She shot me a fierce look. Skinny rear, huh? She snickered, grabbing me by the sleeve of my jacket. She pulled me into the bedroom. It looked like a tornado hit. In one swift move, she locked the door, slipped off her dress, and leaned over, placing her hands on the bed. It took my breath away. She wasn't wearing any underwear. The next morning, we made love and I slept until 10, then stumbled into the shower. By the time I shaved and showered, I started feeling somewhat human. Bree was still asleep, her flame-colored hair spilling over her face as she lay on her stomach. God, her backside was incredible. I headed to the living room, where Grandma was snoring, drooling over a stack of my best shirts. I sighed, grabbing a glass of orange juice and a bun. Come on, Grandma, let's get out of this mess. He lifted his head, rolled his eyes, and got up with a groan. We went out to the backyard, where he did his business, then came over to lie on my legs, basking in the sun. I felt as lazy as a fat lizard, enjoying the warmth of an unusually warm day for this time of year. The door opened, and Stokely stepped out with a glass of milk and a bun. Hi, Angel, I waved. Hey, Mac, she closed the door, standing for a moment before making her way to the glider where I was sitting. Is there enough space for me? She asked. I shifted over, and she settled onto my lap, resting her feet in the space I made. Curling up with a sigh, she took a bite of the bun, her big green eyes locking onto mine. Mac, she began, crumbs scattering across our laps. I interrupted. Eat first, then talk. She giggled but stayed silent until her mouth was empty. Mac, she resumed, if you adopt us, will you be our dad and Bri our mom? Would you want that? I asked. Oh yes, she said. Bri would be the coolest mom ever. You might not be cool, but you're dependable. I love you, and I think you'd make the best dad. I was nearly speechless. Well, I mumbled, being dependable is good, even if it's not cool. She chuckled. I didn't mean it like that. I mean, she's like a whirlwind, and you're like a mountain, you know? She really, really loves you. She talks about you all the time. She's told us everything about you and her. Do you love her? Yes, dear, but as you said, she's a whirlwind. It's like trying to love a thunderstorm or a forest fire. Mountains don't mind thunderstorms or forest fires, she said, looking at me. Maggie kind of resembles her. I'm more like you. She nestled against my chest. I think if we wanted to, we could just let them whirl around us, and we'd be the calm in the center of their storm, she said, looking at me again. I want you to be our dad, Mac. I never thought we'd find someone like you and Bree, too. She shed a few tears. We were so scared and so alone. Mac, is there space in your life for girls like us? I pulled her closer to me. In my heart, Stokely, there's always been a place for someone like you and Maggie. To love me for years, I never thought I'd have something like this. Bree had never shown any interest in having kids. I think you girls changed her life as much as you changed mine. I've seen the way she looks at you. It's like she woke up one day and realized she loves being a mom. I've never seen anything affect her the way you do. You were right about her, she admitted. She's amazing. Sometimes it's just incredible. She decides to do something, and you're along for the ride. I chuckled. I know, right? She's always been like that. The first time we met, a group of U.S. college students went to an amusement park. She decided I'd be her ride partner. I actually came because I was interested in someone else. She whisked me away, and we never saw the others in our group again. We were 20, and I fell for her that day. She's like a force of nature. That just sweeps in and takes over your life. We had our first fight a month after we got married. What was it about? She asked, curious. You'll find this funny. It was about shoes. She kept moving mine and putting hers in their place. I had to rummage through her stuff to find mine. She says I'm obsessed. Maybe she's right, but is it too much to ask her to keep her shoes on her side of the closet? She just exploded. Then I drove her nuts, and she drove me nuts. I've got a plan for what I'm doing tomorrow, and she's totally spontaneous. It's part of who she is, and I love it, but it drives me nuts. She loves how organized I am, but it drives her nuts. These things clash, and we just get on each other's nerves. Stokely giggled. Maggie and I argue about things like this, too. She spends half her life searching for what she's lost. She'll get up and decide on a whim what we're doing. I think we need to adapt a bit, Mac, Stokely added thoughtfully. We need to go with the flow more. They need to understand that we like things in their place. Can we work this out? I don't know, I replied. We never really had a reason to try. Bree and I have a strange relationship. I love her more than ever now, and I think she feels the same, but she's not one to talk about it, she just does. We're closer now than when we were married, and I have affection for her. During our marriage, I didn't do much. I loved her, but we were constantly upset with each other. We sort of just got married without really feeling the need to change. I think we were too immature and selfish, but it somehow worked for us. Perhaps we needed someone like you to make us realize what we were missing. The notion of being a family is both thrilling and frightening. What if we mess it up? We're gambling everything on a leap of faith. I detest uncertainty. I understand, Stokely said, but sometimes you just have to take a leap. You can't expect to gain anything good without the risk of it going wrong. I embraced her, and she purred like a kitten. You're the wisest 11-year-old I've ever met, I remarked. I'll be 12 next month, she corrected. She finished her bun and we headed back to the house. The other two hadn't risen yet, so we took Grandma for a walk. By the time we returned, the late risers were finally up. Bree has never been a morning person, and it seems Maggie isn't either. They both resembled beautiful, tousled, sleepy cats, stretching and yawning for a good while. After their showers, they transformed into human dynamos. Bree whisked us away to obtain our marriage license, file for adoption, arrange temporary custody, and then go out for dinner. We had seafood, and the girls were thrilled with how tasty it was. They were particularly impressed with the prices. Wow, Mac, you must be raking in the dough, Maggie exclaimed. I chuckled. I'm comfortable, I assured her. I don't mind sharing that I earn around $90,000 a year. I could support all of us if needed. Bree makes 10 times more than me, I added. They stared at her, stunned for a moment. She laughed. It's just money, she said. The point is, we can afford to treat you girls to dinner whenever you want. Mac can cook most things better than restaurants if we can convince him to. You cook? Maggie inquired. Yes, but mostly simple dishes, she replied. Anyone can follow a recipe, but he's a culinary genius. She's really quite skilled, I affirmed. I told them if she could just overcome her habit of being easily distracted, she'd be fantastic. She playfully hit me. Make one mistake and he'll never let you live it down, she teased. During our first year of marriage, we didn't have a dog that would eat burnt food. If you throw it in the trash, the whole house stinks. She used to take it out to the backyard and leave it at the base of a tree. It was as if we were making a burnt offering to the tree. Goodness, they laughed heartily. Bree was in a particularly good mood and nestled up to me. I hugged her tightly, and the girls giggled. We've never dined at a place like this, Maggie remarked. Maggie, Bree addressed her with a serious tone. That's not going to happen if you keep talking like that. You'll kick Mac out of the house within a week. I know you can do better. Try again. Maggie pondered for a moment. We've never dined at a place like this, she stated with a triumphant smile as I nodded in agreement. We know how to speak, Bree interjected. I mean truly speak, she clarified. We just fell into the habit of talking like everyone else on the street. We attended school until my mother passed away. We excelled academically. I believe in you, dear, I reassured her. I'm confident you'll succeed. Though we're from Detroit, we possess sophistication. The girls appeared on the verge of bursting with pride. Bree also gave them etiquette lessons. They mimicked her attire, learned her mannerisms, and emulated her grooming habits. After 6 months, one might have assumed they had been raised and educated in New England amidst high society for their entire lives. They adapted quickly, excelling academically. That evening marked the beginning. Bree was exhilarated upon our return home. She instructed the girls to turn on the TV and leave it on all night. They looked at her with curiosity. "Your father and I need some time alone," she winked at them. They erupted into hysterical giggles, blushing beet red. Bree pulled me into the bedroom. "We're celebrating," she informed me. "What's the occasion?" I inquired. "It's the beginning of something amazing," she declared. "I love you, Mac. Never doubt it. We'll do this every night. I'll remind you of my love, then show you how. We've always been explosive in bed. Tonight, I want to take it to a whole new level, and then we'll maintain this level for the rest of our lives. Do you understand?" "Show me," I challenged. She unpinned her hair, letting it cascade down, rarely worn loose. It reached the top of her backside, thick and wavy, twirling like a dancer's ribbon as she approached me. Turning her back, she whispered, "Unleash the lightning." I unzipped her blue dress, my knuckles trailing down her spine. She winced, stepping aside and releasing her locks into the air. Dropping her shoulders, the dress fell, briefly grazing her chest and thighs before pooling at her feet. Exiting gracefully, her heels accentuated her calves. She was magnificent. Men orbited around her like moths to a flame, but her smoldering intensity focused solely on me, making me feel special. Her hand slipped behind her back, and her bra fell away, revealing her impressive bosom against her creamy white skin. "I think someone's overdressed," she teased. "What shall we do about it?" I inquired. Pushing me onto the bed, she straddled me, her scent masking the Chanel she wore, subtle and seductive. Undoing my shirt buttons, she freed me from my trousers, leaving my hands restrained. Pushing me back, she undid my belt and pants, sliding them off along with my boots and socks. It was a new level of sensuality. She exuded heat, a creature of allure and mystery. In that moment, I realized how deeply I loved her, willing to sacrifice anything for her without hesitation. Our lovemaking became intense and wild, unlike anything before. Locking eyes with me, she raised her head. "Mac, I love you," she confessed. "I've always known it. I'm selfish, I admit it. I've never truly given myself to anyone until now. Do you want me, Mac? For the first time in my life, I'm ready to be your partner, your lover, your wife, the mother of our girls. Will you guide me, love me, and be patient with me? I swear you'll never regret it. I'm ready, Mac, if you'll have me. Do you love me as much?" I silenced her with a passionate kiss. "I love you more than anything," I declared. "But you'll need to guide me too. Be patient with me as I am with you. I've always loved you. Together, we can do this. I'll do anything for you," she whispered. "For the girls too. I never imagined I could feel this way. They came into my life, and I can't help but love them. I'm scared, Mac, terrified I'll be a bad mother. It's always been my fear, which is why I never entertained the thought of having children. I fear I'll ruin them. I don't know how to be a father either," I chuckled. "But I suspect I'll be a great one. It's something you learn by doing. No one knows what they're doing until they do it. I don't know how to be a husband either, at least not a good one. We messed up the first time, Brianna." "I know," she whispered. "Mostly me. I was so immature. Sure, in many ways I still am, Mac, but I'll try my best to grow." "Yes, me too," I said, holding her close. Eventually, we drifted off to sleep. Upon waking, we took a shower together, giggling like school children. After drying off, she slipped into her pajamas. "What's the plan?" I inquired. "If I'm not mistaken, we'll have guests soon," she replied with a smile. "You better get dressed too." "I'm too lazy to get up now," I groaned, throwing on some boxers and a t-shirt. Within 10 minutes of getting back into bed, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," Bree called out. Stokely popped her head in, her face lighting up at the sight of us. She darted across the room to join us, inadvertently leaving the door ajar, allowing our furry friend to saunter in and settle across our legs, purring contentedly. A few minutes later, Maggie joined the fray, and we engaged in an impromptu wrestling match with Grandma. Despite his size, Grandma emerged victorious. We bundled him up in a blanket and escorted him out of the bedroom. Finally free from his presence, we all piled back into bed for some cuddles. About 30 minutes later, hunger pangs struck. So we headed to the diner for breakfast at 2 p.m. and Bree announced that we had an appointment but kept the details under wraps. She led us to the municipal court. "What's going on?" I asked. "The most important case of my life," she chuckled, ushering us into one of the courtrooms where the magistrate awaited, asking if we were ready. "Ready for what?" I wondered aloud. Bree knelt down, producing a box from her purse. "Mac, will you marry me again?" she asked. This time, I promise it's forever. You know I never stopped loving you or wanting to be your wife. You're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love. Please, Mac, marry me." In the box were our wedding rings along with hers. "Are you sure, Brianna?" I inquired. "I've never been more sure," she said, turning to the girls for support. "He's so stubborn." "Yes, please, Mac," they chimed in. "Bri really loves you. We want to be a family." "We love you too, and we love Bri." How could I say no? It took about 10 minutes, and it was official. Bri treated us to dinner at a new Greek restaurant to celebrate. As I looked around, I saw my future unfolding before me. The most beautiful woman in the world as my wife and 2 lovely daughters, who would grow into remarkable women. Could we make it work? Only time would tell. It took about a month to gain custody of the girls. Bri worked tirelessly to make it happen. When we finally did, they were overjoyed, and we were ecstatic. Bri sold her apartment and we settled into life in my house. I worried that Bri and I might get on each other's nerves, especially at first. About 3 weeks after remarrying, we had a minor spat when Bri went to dinner with a client and forgot to call us. When she got back home, she was met with 6 accusing eyes. "What?" she asked. Stokely picked up the phone and Bri's eyes filled with understanding. She opened her mouth and burst into tears, gathering us all on the couch. She knelt down in front of us and started sobbing. "I'm so sorry," she managed. "I just forgot to call. I should have. Please don't be mad at me. I'll try not to do it again. I can't promise, but I'll tell my assistant to remind me." I was so focused on finishing the meeting and getting home. "Do you forgive me, Stokely, Maggie, Mac?" "I'm really sorry." Bri rarely apologized, maybe a dozen times in her life. This marked the start of a completely new dynamic between us. We both made efforts to keep each other happy, and the girls were incredible at helping us. Sometimes it felt like they were the adults and we were the kids. We had a few minor disagreements, but I'd never felt so content and happy. There was a private school on the campus where I taught, and Bri enrolled the girls there. They traveled with me to and from school, and during these trips we bonded. They confided in me about everything, filling my life with their enthusiasm. After classes, we'd head home. They'd do their homework, usually taking a couple of hours. Once they were done, we'd take Grandma for a walk. Dinner started at 5 if we were eating at home. Bri usually got back by 6:30. If she was running late, she'd call, and on those nights, we'd dine out. When Maggie turned 16, Bri asked what she wanted for her birthday. She said she wanted her driver's license. She studied and practiced for 2 weeks and passed the exams on her first try. The night before her birthday, Bri brought it up in bed. "I want to buy her a car," she said. "What kind?" I asked. "A new Camaro convertible," she replied. "How much?" I inquired. "Does it matter?" she retorted. "No, not really," I replied. "I just like to know everything, Bri." "I know," she said, kissing me. "I think we can get the one I want for around $60,000. I whistled. "That's a hefty price tag, but she's an amazing girl. She deserves it." "Yes," Brianna smiled. "There's been a lot of bad in their lives, Mac. Let's make sure they only have good now." We ordered the car, bright yellow with black stripes and interior, a big V8. Against my judgment, Brianna thought it would hold its value better, and she was probably right. Either way, I knew it would drive Maggie crazy. When the car arrived, we parked it in the garage as it was time to leave for school. The girls grabbed their bags and followed me to the car. Bri was in the garage, and I didn't unlock the doors. "Dad," Stokely said, "let us in." "Not today," I said. "You'll drive Maggie? Mom isn't going to work?" she asked. "No, she's leaving," I replied. "Then how will I get there?" she asked. I pressed the garage door opener. "You're driving," I said, pointing inside. Her eyes widened, and Maggie began to cry. I jumped out of the car, and Brianna rushed down the driveway. We hugged Maggie together. "What's wrong, dear?" I asked. "We thought you'd be happy. This is your car. We're giving it to you for your birthday." She tried to speak, but she was too upset for us to understand. She buried her face in my chest, and we held and comforted her until she calmed down enough to talk. Stokely joined us, and finally we got Maggie to speak. "I don't need a car," she choked out. "I love you guys so much, and this is too much. We don't want you to feel like you have to buy us things. Stokely and I already talked about this. We don't need anything. We just need you to love us." She broke down again. "Honey, we really do love you," Brianna reassured her. "We love you both, more than anything in the world. Having you girls is a dream come true for both of us. We love buying things for you. We work hard and earn a lot of money so we can buy things for our girls. Making you happy is how we show our love. It might not be a grand gesture, but it's our way." Stokely was in tears now too. I kissed them both on the cheeks. "Let's go," I said. "This is a really cool car. Let's at least go take a look." They wiped their eyes and let me lead them to the garage. I opened the door for Maggie, and Brianna helped Stokely into the passenger seat. Maggie gripped the steering wheel and looked at me. A smile spread across her beautiful face. "It suits you," I told her. "Start her up." The powerful V8 engine roared to life, and they both trembled with excitement. I closed the door and tapped on the window. Maggie lowered it, and I kissed her again. "See you at school," I said. She pulled out onto the street and paused. Bree and I stood nearby, watching. Then her door swung open, and she leapt out, throwing herself into our arms and showering us with kisses. "I love you so much," she repeated. "Thank you. You're the best mom and dad in the world." She dashed back to her car, and they drove off. I turned to Brianna, who was crying like a baby for some inexplicable reason. Tears filled my own eyes. "Look at us," I said. "You'd think there were 3 of us or something. That was a wonderful idea, Bree. You're an amazing woman." We hugged each other tightly for a long while. I knew I'd be late for class, but I didn't mind. When Stokely turned 16, we gave her the same car. It wasn't as emotional, but it was still special. We took them to Hawaii and bought them bikes when they graduated from high school. Maggie was already in college. The day Stokely started college, I came home to find Brianna crying on the couch. I sat beside her, hugged her, and we sat in silence for a while. She rested her head on my chest and cried softly. Finally, she looked up at me, tears filling her big blue eyes. "Our kids are all grown up, Mac," she said. "I know," I replied, kissing her. "It's what kids do." She cupped my face in her hands, looking into my eyes. "Let's have another one, Mac," she said. "This time, just you and me. I want a baby, Mac." Overwhelmed, she started crying again. "I never thought this would happen. I love you so much, and I already miss them terribly. I want to experience it all over again. It was so incredible. I know they're only 60 miles away, but I miss them." "Me too, kitten," I said. "Maybe if we're going to have this baby, we should go practice." She gasped, staring at me. "Really? Do you want that? I mean, to have a baby?" "Of course," I said. "I hope it's a red-haired girl like you. I love you with all my heart, Brianna." I scooped her up and carried her through the empty house to our bedroom to start practicing. We had to shoo Granville out, but I found I rather enjoyed making babies. As I drifted off to sleep, the picture on the nightstand of Maggie and Stokely held my gaze. They didn't look like a Ford, not at all. My wife cheated on me with a 15-year friend during my work trip. I confronted them, got my revenge. I'm Steve, and my wife's Kate. We've been married for more than 3 years. The first year was really happy, the second was good, and the third had some issues. It might seem silly or childish. I can't say I disagree, but I'm not sure if you would react differently. We were in the middle of an argument. We've had a lot of those lately, Kate and I, but this one was really bad. I don't even know what it was about, something small like the laundry or an unpaid bill. Kate has this habit of bringing up irrelevant complaints during arguments, things that have nothing to do with what we're fighting about. It could be stuff from years ago, like when I didn't pick up her sister from a party, or just random things that occur to her to hit me with. This was one of those times. "And you just never stop talking. Do you know that, Steve?" She said this in a harsh tone. "Nothing makes you happier than the sound of your own voice, even when we're, in bed." There was silence. Kate must have seen from my face that she went too far. I was hurt, so I just looked at her. I thought about saying I had no idea my talking during closeness bothered her. It's how I express my love and excitement. But then I decided not to say anything. Kate continued, saying my talking distracts her during closeness and turns her off. I was surprised. Why hadn't she mentioned this before? We've been married for over 3 years, and I thought she enjoyed my affectionate words. She talked less than I did in bed, but she always said a few words. After a long silence, I stood up and told Kate I'd try to only speak when it's important. Then I left the room. Update, I wasn't proud of my actions afterward. All I can say is I felt really hurt. The unexpected argument hit me hard. I thought if she wanted silence, then she would get silence. Our fights were getting worse. Despite still loving Kate, we found it harder and harder to be content with each other. There were fewer happy times and more tense moments, and arguments over small things. A major issue was my job as a sales rep for a plumbing supply company, requiring me to travel for about 3 weeks, 4 days a month. Kate didn't like me being away so much, but she knew this before we got married. She also wanted to start a family, which I resisted for another 2 years. I expected a promotion that would let me stop traveling. I just didn't want to have a baby until I could be home all the time. So those were the big issues. Lately, even tiny things seemed to trigger fights. The reservoir of love and goodwill seemed almost empty, and I didn't know why. One thing Kate said kept bothering me, that my talking during closeness was the opposite of what turned her on. Did that mean she was enjoying closeness with someone else? Someone who didn't talk, it seemed far-fetched until I thought about it more, during my last trip about 10 days. Earlier, I couldn't reach her on the phone twice. The second time, she had her cell phone switched off when she should have been back from work. The next day, she said she went for a beer with friends, which seemed reasonable, except I called the house around 10:30 and she was still out. Also, in the past month, 3 times I answered the phone and the person hung up. Not a big deal, but it rarely happened before, so I got more suspicious and took action. For the next 2 weeks, Kate probably thought she was living with a mute. No small talk, no idle conversation, no words unless absolutely necessary. Instead of saying, "Could you pass the salt, honey?" I got up and got it myself. In response to, "What's the weather going to be like today?" I passed her the weather page of the newspaper. If she asked me to make dinner that night, all she got was, "Okay." When she left for work and said, "Goodbye, honey," I gave her a smile and a wave. It became a game to see how few words I could say to her in a day. Kate knew I was angry and hurt, and she knew why. At first, she didn't seem to care much, but after that, she started trying to make up. She didn't exactly apologize, that was rare in our house, but she became much more affectionate. Kisses greeted me in bed in the morning, on the way out for work, and at bedtime. Sometimes she leaned over to give me a hug while I was reading the paper over coffee in the morning, or rubbed my shoulders while we were watching TV. It was a funny thing, even as my anger gradually calmed down and nobody can stay white-hot angry over days, I kept saying as little as possible. Before speaking, I'd ask myself if I really needed to say it, and usually the answer was no. I was listening more, observing more, and keeping my thoughts to myself. About 10 days after the argument, Kate suggested we make love. Whether she wanted to or it was part of making up, I couldn't tell. After dinner, during which she told me some stories about work and I spoke no more than 6 words, she stood up and took me by the hand, urging me to leave the dishes for later. With a big, warm smile, she conveyed that there was something else she needed at that moment. As she led me back to the bedroom, I wondered if the distance between us had grown because of my silence, or if I was silent because we had already drifted so far apart. During the entire encounter, I hadn't uttered a word. As we coupled smoothly, easily, and familiarly, I remained completely silent, feeling a sense of unnatural coldness and distance. I wasn't even sure if it was what Kate truly wanted, but after that argument, I had no intention of saying a word. After we finished, I rolled off her, and she snuggled into me, emitting a happy, Without any verbal communication, we relaxed together for a while, still without exchanging any words. I couldn't discern what the experience had been like for her. For me, it felt cold and empty, and whether that was due to the silence or the growing distance between us remained uncertain. Update: after a few more days of minimal conversation, Kate became upset with me. One night during dinner, she expressed frustration, questioning my silence and whether I had anything to say. After a moment of thought, I responded that I thought this was what she wanted. She clarified, explaining that she desired a husband who communicates and shares feelings, not someone resembling a mannequin from a department store. Privately, I chuckled, thinking, "Good one, Kate." Last week she had complained about me talking too much, so I was making an effort to rectify that. Kate accused me of taking the silent treatment too far, labeling it the Silent Sam routine. I looked at her for a moment before speaking. Some of my confusion was intended to annoy her, and partly, I was genuinely puzzled. I honestly didn't know what she wanted. First, I talked too much, then, too little. "How am I supposed to know what to do now?" She glared at me, clearly very angry, insisting that I stop and be the man she married. I regretted my earlier words, stating that she doesn't talk too much. We were arguing. I was upset, and I just threw that at her. After a pause, I added, "All right, Kate, but I have to admit, your words got me thinking that maybe I do talk too much, or without thinking first about whether I really have anything to say." After a moment, I smiled at her, saying, "In a way, all this has been helpful." She smiled back warmly, her anger seemingly gone, and for a moment I felt the closeness between us that had been missing. I then brought up the topic of making love, genuinely seeking to understand. I asked if she meant what she said about not talking during closeness. Rather than answering my question, Kate left the table. For the rest of the evening, she gave me the cold shoulder, which didn't seem fair despite my honest attempt to understand her feelings. The next morning brought a more hopeful atmosphere. Kate had stepped back from her initial attack, expressing a desire for communication. Unfortunately, her focus remained on the end of the conversation, evident in her glares and tight-lipped phrases at breakfast. We endured a few more days of minimal communication, ironic this time, as she was giving me the silent treatment. After 3 to 4 days, Kate's mood drastically changed again. She came home from work looking very upset and headed straight for the shower. Over dinner, she was distracted, saying little and frequently losing track of my conversation. This wasn't the angry, silent treatment anymore. She was clearly preoccupied with something. But when I asked her if something was wrong, and I asked several times, she only mentioned a problem at work. I noticed, though, that she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. Unsure of what was bothering her, I decided to wait and see. The next day, I received a call at work. Ernie Matazzo confirmed my suspicions about Kate having an affair. I thanked him, left work, and went home. Looking at the photos, the only surprise was the guy, Adam, who hadn't been my best man but was one of my groomsmen. He'd always admired Kate, and I'd never considered him a threat. I felt cold and empty, like the last time Kate and I were in bed together. I sat for a long time, contemplating everything, and pulled out the photos, finding them unchanged from the first time I put them away. Update: when Kate arrived home, she found me seated on the couch, seemingly idle. I remained quiet as she greeted me, my expression crafted to appear neutral rather than angry. Her inquiry about my unusual behavior grew more pointed, a blend of concern and annoyance evident in her edgier tone as she probed further, sensing that something was amiss. I maintained my silence. Frustration welled within her as she pressed for an explanation, insinuating a return to the silent treatment of the past. In response, I sat up, cutting through the tension with a direct question. I asked her how long she had been dating him. Kate, taken aback, recoiled in shock and retreated a step. Perplexed, she took a seat across from me, seeking to understand my accusation. Her attempts to read my expression proved futile. The atmosphere thickened as she continued to deny any involvement with someone else, clasping her hands tightly in her lap as she implored me to reveal the source of my accusations. Her plea, laden with frustration, suggested that I harbored a guilty conscience. Unyielding, I presented an envelope containing a photograph, a damning image of Kate on Adam's bed. She looked at it briefly, dropped it in surprise, and recoiled as though it were a threat. Blushing, she retreated into her chair, avoiding eye contact. In the face of my persistent silence, she decided to change the subject, heading for the bedroom. However, I intercepted her with the incriminating photo. She hesitated, and unable to escape my unrelenting gaze, she finally met my eyes with a silent plea. "How long?" I reiterated. Her response was a withdrawal into herself, arms wrapped tightly around her as she shook her head. The silence lingered, and she eventually appealed to me, requesting that I spare her from discussing the matter. Declaring my decision to leave, I moved toward the bedroom to pack. In a desperate plea, she implored me to wait, promising to disclose everything. Relenting, I resumed my seat, observing her as she struggled to maintain eye contact. Unable to endure the silence, she confessed, apologizing and expressing remorse as she pleaded with me not to leave. I remained seated, meeting her gaze with an unwavering expression. She averted her eyes, and after a moment, she mustered the courage to look back at me, tearfully admitting that Adam had told her I was also involved. Surprised, I refrained from questioning her and gestured for her to continue. Kate explained that a month earlier she had encountered Adam at the supermarket. He, being charming and friendly, had offered her companionship in my absence, arriving at our house with pizza and wine. They spent a casual evening together, misled by Adam's claim that I too was engaged in similar actions. Towards the end, he started acting worried and concerned. When Kate questioned him about it, he claimed I had been unfaithful. He did an impressive job at acting, appearing reluctant, with his head hanging, avoiding an eye contact with me. According to him, you and he had a conversation a couple of weeks earlier where you confessed about a girl you were involved with during your trips. He provided convincing details about her appearance, where you met, and how great you said she was in bed. I started crying, and Adam consoled me, expressing admiration for my beauty and how he couldn't fathom how any man could cheat on me. A little while later, we ended up in bed together, and I only found out yesterday that the entire story was false. I waited, expressionless. She continued, her expression now more somber than before. "I found myself in his apartment," she said. "After he had this smug demeanor. He brought up the notion that if it weren't for your involvement with Julia, we wouldn't have realized how well we connect." I raised the issue of inconsistency, reminding him that during our initial conversation about your supposed lover, he had mentioned the name Joanne. He couldn't recall any of the details, like her appearance or how you met. Frustrated, I screamed at him to tell me the truth. "Did you really cheat on me?" He laughed, admitting it was just a story to get me into bed. Kate's face turned red with anger. I got up, threw on my clothes, and berated him, calling him out for making a fool of me, she continued. He just lay there, smiling, unapologetic and unremorseful. I couldn't believe what I had done. She trailed off, her voice choked with emotion, and then she broke down, sobbing with her face in her hands, her body heaving. The urge to comfort Kate was overshadowed by a cold emptiness. Was she truly that naive, or had our love deteriorated to the point where she was willing to believe even the most absurd stories? And then there was my rage at Adam, a friend of 15 years. I sat in silence while Kate sobbed. After about 5 minutes, I stood up. Kate watched me fearfully as I took her cell phone from her purse, put it in my pocket, and went to the bedroom and kitchen, unplugging the phones and putting them in a bag under my arm. Before departing, I glanced back at Kate and conveyed that I would return. I instructed her not to leave and cautioned against engaging in conversations with anyone. Despite my quiet tone, she appeared terrified and affirmed my instructions with a nod. Update: on the way to Adam S. I focused on controlling my breath to appear calm and friendly. When Adam opened his door, he seemed surprised and nervous. Without hesitation, I invited him for a couple of beers and suggested watching the Phillies, saying Kate was at a meeting. Though he observed me carefully, he put on a friendly demeanor and agreed to my proposal. We sat in his living room, chatting amiably while the game played in the background. Keeping the conversation light, I noticed Adam gradually relaxing, thinking it was a casual visit. However, I remained uncertain about the situation. It took more than an hour to steer the conversation toward relationships. I inquired about the ladies he was dating, making him momentarily nervous, but my reassuring smile prompted him to share details about a girl from work he'd been seeing casually. I mentioned a talkative college girlfriend, and Adam took the bait, agreeing that actions speak louder than words during intimate moments. Laughing, he boasted about revealing the desires of many girls, expressing satisfaction. Leaning in, I asked about Kate's preferences, catching him off guard. After a moment of shock, he tried to laugh it off, but I kept pressing him with a smile. He finally agreed to be quiet, looking at me fearfully. Expressing my disbelief, I confronted him about betraying our friendship and deceiving my wife to have an affair with her. Downplaying it, he claimed it wasn't a big deal, arguing, she's just a woman. He trailed off uncertainly, looking at my face. Staring at him in disbelief, I questioned how I had ever been friends with him. Asserting that things were better out in the open, I insisted he tell me everything about his deceitful game with Kate. Having already talked to her, I warned that lying wouldn't work. Wide-eyed and genuinely afraid, Adam nodded at me, signaling his readiness to talk. He recounted the story, aligning closely with what Kate had said. He had always found her attractive and had been flirting with her for several months whenever he encountered her. He was single. One week he bumped into her at the supermarket and saw his chance. Initially thinking he could seduce her, he fabricated a story about my affair. When it became apparent she wouldn't cheat on me, he deliberately angered her and made her feel sorry for herself, making it easier to get her into bed. They met about 5 more times, always at his place. The first encounter was great because she was upset about my alleged affair, she cried. However, the subsequent times were fantastic, exactly as he described. When he noticed my disapproval, he abruptly stopped talking. I had cut his hair almost to the roots by then, finding satisfaction in picturing him hiding his head with hats for weeks. Coldly, I inquired if it was over. After a brief hesitation, he admitted it was and shared that she found out about the fabricated story. Unable to recall the name of the supposed girl I was dating, she got angry and left. I was ready to leave, feeling empty. Although I could have pressed for more details, I decided against it. I informed Adam that our friendship was over, warning against retaliation. We agreed not to involve the police. He nodded, looking more humiliated than angry, and requested to be released. Smiling, I assured him I'd leave the apartment door open, allowing him to free himself in about an hour. I walked away without turning back. Update: upon my return, Kate was seated on the couch in her bathrobe, her wet hair indicating recent distress. As I moved around the apartment, fixing the phones, she remained visibly scared and unhappy. Taking a seat across from her, we exchanged glances, but I maintained my silence. Eventually, she inquired about my actions, to which I explained the conversation with Adam, assuring her that I hadn't. Resorted to violence and expressing doubt about hearing from him anytime soon. Despite acknowledging that she almost wished I had confronted him physically, she recognized the potential consequences. Troubled, she sought to move past the situation, admitting her foolishness and asking for forgiveness. I looked at her for a prolonged moment before responding, our pattern of saying very little to each other becoming a habit. I dawned to know, I finally replied, and it was an honest admission. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began to cry. The following morning, Kate entered the kitchen, expressing delight at the breakfast and coffee set on the table. Her joy faded abruptly upon noticing the 2 large suitcases near the door. Distraught, she questioned my departure, pleading with me not to leave. Instead of leaving without a word, I served her a cup of coffee and persuaded her to sit across from me. Kate, it's over, I declared. I admitted uncertainty about what had transpired or why, but emphasized that our relationship had deteriorated. Despite acknowledging our initial compatibility, I highlighted a year of impatience, snappiness, and constant fighting. I pointed out that her choice to believe Adam's dubious story about my infidelity and her subsequent actions indicated a departure from the woman I had married. I suggested she must have been on the verge of straying for our relationship to reach this point. Pausing, I waited for her response, but she cried silently, holding her face in her hands. When I ceased speaking, she looked up at me pleadingly. I offered her an opportunity to speak, to prove me wrong, to outline a path to revive our love. Regrettably, she remained silent, merely gazing at me and crying. I headed to the door, bidding her farewell as I picked up my suitcases and departed. My wife begged me to pay for her cancer treatment after cheating on me. Here's how I chose to respond. I initially encountered Ramona during my college years. At that time, she had a robust build, large glasses, and struggled with skin issues. Her major was in art, and her fashion sense was unconventional, reflecting her unique style. Regrettably, her distinctive flair didn't resonate as attractive or appealing to most guys, myself included. Despite pursuing different majors, she in art and myself in production technology, we found ourselves enrolled in the same computer graphics design classes due to shared program requirements. She needed the class for her diploma, while I required it as a prerequisite for AutoCAD. Assigned to collaborate on a group project, we realized we hadn't interacted much before, despite sharing some classes. Right from the outset, it was evident we were almost polar opposites. While I frequented the track and hovered around the popular crowd, Ramona smoked and gravitated towards the fringe of the avant-garde, the beatniks, and the artistic circles. My dating circle mainly consisted of level 2 cheerleaders and jocks, whereas Ramona was often relegated to the role of the larger friend or the second-choice girlfriend among the more conventionally beautiful or promiscuous art students. While working on our project, we found ourselves spending a considerable amount of time together. Human nature compelled me to glance at her, prompting her, I assumed, to reciprocate. One evening, our conversation extended beyond project matters and delved into more personal topics. When my next girlfriend arrived to pick me up, I felt a twinge of sadness at leaving Ramona, and it seemed she felt similarly. The following day in computer class, Ramona exhibited a frosty demeanor towards me. "What did I do now?" I inquired. "You're an absolute idiot," she retorted, her voice verging on tears. Sensing the need for privacy, I took her hand and ushered her out of the lab to a nearby park bench. After fetching refreshments, we resumed our discussion in a more comfortable setting, free from any potential disruptions. "Why do you think I'm a prick?" I queried with a smile. "Because you are," she replied, wiping away tears. "Despite lacking an artistic soul, I had hoped you were different," she added. As our conversation progressed, I reflected on her words. "And then you with that woman," she interjected. "Are you upset I went on a date?" I asked incredulously. "No way," she snapped. "It's just that you're all the same. You're not interested in a meaningful connection with a woman who genuinely cares for you and loves you. You just want superficial relations with some buxom girl without intelligence," she remarked sharply. "Well," I responded calmly, "well-endowed women have the intelligence to leverage their assets, whether in dating, relationships, or simply in matters of closeness." She regarded me skeptically and inquired, "What exactly are you implying?" Irritated, I retorted, "They communicate. They take actions to express their interest to the guy." She remained speechless, her fists clenched in frustration, visibly seething with anger. It seemed as if steam would soon billow from her ears. Prompting me to seek clarity and understand where we stood, with a decisive gesture, I reached over and removed her cumbersome glasses, recognizing they obstructed her beauty. Then I kissed her, not a mere peck, but a fervent, passionate embrace. Later, I learned it was her first kiss with a non-relative. That initial kiss led to more carnal ones as she relaxed, parting her lips, and our tongues intertwined in a sensual dance. Embracing her tightly, we shared lingering kisses on a park bench. The ensuing weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We completed our project, earning an A, and embarked on a romantic relationship. Ramona opted for contact lenses, visited a dermatologist, and adopted a slightly more conventional wardrobe. I never requested she abandon her bohemian style, but as our outings became more frequent, she required additional attire. You know how women are. She invited me to accompany her on a shopping trip and sought my opinion. I noted that jeans were a popular choice, even among artists. However, she expressed feeling too large for pants. I reassured her, praising her curves and likening her to the voluptuous models depicted by the artist Rubens. Encouraged, she purchased jeans and looked fantastic in them. Yet, I suggested her tops and sweatshirts didn't quite complement her jeans or skirts. She accused me of only being interested in her chest. I jokingly admitted she was right but emphasized they were mine, and she wore them for my benefit. Being carnal with Ramona felt akin to being with a fairy tale princess. Though not wild, it held a special quality. As her first partner, I endeavored to make it enjoyable and memorable for her. Over time, her interest in closeness grew, and she even began to request it. While we never delved into extreme kinks, I cherished every moment because of my deep love for her. Some weeks later, she gazed at her reflection and remarked, feeling like a larger version of the type of woman she despised. I reassured her, affirming she was my girlfriend, regardless of appearances. We found immense happiness together and eventually became engaged. Following graduation, I pursued a career at an automotive design firm, while Ramona found her calling doing layouts for an art magazine. My family adored Ramona and embraced her warmly. On the other hand, Ramona's family was limited to her mom and sister. To say the least, I didn't particularly care for them. Once, at our engagement celebration, I overheard her sister suggesting to someone that I was too conventional and might stifle Ramona's artistic vision. Despite Ramona appearing radiant and joyous, her mom whispered to her sister that she believed our marriage was due to a pregnancy and wouldn't last. However, over time, we proved them both wrong. We were deeply content and genuinely loved each other. At our 7th anniversary gathering, her mom began hinting about becoming a grandmother, since Ramona and I were her only hope for grandchildren. As her sister was unable, Ramona quickly assured her we were trying. Despite our efforts over several years, we faced disappointment. Ramona's mom, Maddie, took it upon herself to schedule U.S. appointments at a fertility clinic, seemingly presuming the issue was with me. I attended the appointment, underwent tests, and provided samples, only to discover everything was normal on my end. Maddie, upon hearing the news, humorously suggested we practice more until our work was finished so she could become a grandmother while still young. However, Ramona's results painted a different picture, altering our lives indefinitely. We learned she had various reproductive health issues, making conceiving naturally extremely unlikely, if not improbable. That evening, I held her tightly as she wept herself to sleep. I reassured her that adoption or exploring available treatments were viable options for us. Deep down, I harbored resentment toward her mother for escalating the situation to such an extent. Tearfully, she told me, "If you want a divorce, you can have it. I'll never leave you unless you push me away." Addressing Ramona, I relayed her mother's accusation that she might cheat on me to conceive. "I'll never betray you, Mona. You mean everything to me," I assured her. Meeting her gaze, she questioned, "Why stay with a woman who's unable to have children?" Ensuring she caught every nuance of my sincerity, I replied, "Because I love you more than anything in this world, and losing you would devastate me." She seemed to calm down a bit and eventually drifted off to sleep. But honestly, those days are now a blur, and I struggle to recall all the details. 2 days later, we received a call from the clinic summoning us for an appointment. During the consultation, the doctor revealed she had referred Ramona's tests to a specialist. Our shock intensified upon discovering Ramona was battling an aggressive form of cancer in its early stages. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This explained her constant fatigue at 25, the unexplained body soreness, and frequent mood swings and irritability. The revelation terrified me. Fortunately, we caught it early enough to have a favorable prognosis for her recovery. The doctor directed us to a specialized oncology center and arranged an appointment for the following day. Ramona underwent an extensive battery of tests, marking the beginning of her challenging journey. I took a leave of absence and remained by Ramona's side throughout her ordeal. I stayed beside her during every test, offering support and encouragement as we awaited results. In the following weeks, Ramona underwent lymph node surgery and commenced radiation therapy. I occupied the family suite at the cancer center to be close to her. I greeted her each morning, stayed by her side all day, and even obtained permission to stay overnight until she drifted off to sleep. Occasionally, her mother and sister visited, displaying a chilly demeanor toward me, perhaps harboring the misguided notion that I was somehow responsible for Ramona's illness. However, the radiation therapy proved ineffective and began injuring healthy tissue alongside the tumors. Consequently, we opted for chemotherapy. Ramona experienced significant weight loss due to radiation, and chemotherapy threatened to cause hair loss. The hospital nurses were incredibly supportive, often going beyond their duties to assist me in caring for Ramona. One nurse, Kelly, was particularly invaluable. With her striking red hair, green eyes, and tall, slender frame, she exuded warmth and kindness. Each morning, Kelly greeted me with a smile or a joke, offering a comforting embrace or a listening ear whenever I needed it most, helping me maintain a positive outlook. The majority of nurses in the oncology unit had shifts lasting 4 10-hour days, with 3 days off. However, Kelly worked from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. She was present when I left Ramona at night and also when I returned at 6 a.m. the next day. In my experience, she was consistently cheerful, particularly in my presence. The only instance I recall her becoming upset was during a conversation with Ramona's mother, Maddie. Maddie remarked that I might likely leave her daughter now that she was sick. Kelly reacted fiercely, threatening to physically intervene. "This environment is utterly disheartening," Kelly expressed. "A large number of our patients receive minimal visitors as their loved ones are hesitant to visit due to concerns of contagion," she elaborated. She emphasized my constant presence and support for Ramona during difficult times. "Holding the vomit bucket and assisting her to the restroom, were you here?" she asked pointedly, acknowledging my dedication. "He assists her when she needs to use the restroom," Kelly commented. "Were you around when she experienced hair loss?" "He shaved his head to match hers," she chuckled, recalling his shiny scalp. "Were you present during that time?" she inquired with irritation. "He administers sponge baths to help her maintain dignity," she noted. "Were you present then?" she questioned again. "He has devoted all his vacation and sick leave to her. Her health insurance doesn't cover the treatment, so he's deeply in debt for your daughter," she asserted. "And throughout it all, he has been by her side every single day, holding her hand and reassuring her of his love," she snapped, pointing a finger at Maddie's face. I wish I had witnessed it myself, but hearing about it later brought a slight smile to my face. But what truly mattered to me was Ramona's well-being. Several nurses shared the incident with me, all equally enraged at Maddie. I noticed Maddie became noticeably less aloof toward me afterward. In fact, she even reached out and patted me on the shoulder as I held Ramona's hand during her afternoon nap. The chemotherapy took a toll on Ramona, leaving her weakened but cancer-free. Her hair began to grow back, and we adopted a new diet to help her regain strength. She underwent multiple plastic surgeries to remove excess skin from her weight loss. Ramona emerged as a new woman, 80 lbs lighter, with clear skin, contact lenses replacing her glasses, and her hair restored. People who knew her couldn't help but take a second glance. Though not as striking as Kelly, she was the best version of herself, and my love for her remained unwavering. I returned to work, putting in extra hours to cover the medical expenses we incurred. Ramona couldn't work for a while. Our bed life, always fulfilling, intensified as Ramona expressed gratitude for my support during her illness. She began casually dating women from her previous job while I was at work. It seemed like a way for her to socialize more, as she was never very outgoing apart from me. Perhaps it was a form of post-cancer affirmation, though I didn't take it too seriously. Unbeknownst to me, my marriage was in jeopardy. Over the following weeks, Rem started returning home later and often appeared intoxicated. "I've never had so much fun," she remarked. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, working 12 to 16-hour days to cover her medical expenses while she enjoyed herself without me. Her attire became increasingly revealing, prompting my inquiry. She explained she wanted to flaunt her newfound body, claiming it was just for fun. I couldn't help but wonder when it became necessary for her to seek validation from others. During that time, I pondered our marriage, sensing something was amiss. Despite my apprehensions, I hesitated to confront the truth. Ramona had become my entire world. Our shared experiences, particularly battling cancer, had deepened our bond significantly. Unbeknownst to me, my dedication had caught the attention of my company's owners, resulting in a substantial raise, promotion, and bonus. I saw this as an opportunity to plan a vacation with Ramona, hoping it would rekindle our relationship. Rather than immediately sharing the good news with Ramona, I decided to surprise her with a small family celebration for her upcoming birthday, hoping to discuss the idea of relocating together to rejuvenate our marriage. However, events unfolded differently, shattering my heart and our marriage. During a routine checkup at the hospital, Ramona encountered Kelly, whom she never liked due to her beauty and perceived threat, that overweight woman. Even with Ramona's weight loss, she felt inferior to Kelly standing beside her. "Hey Ramona," Kelly greeted. "It's strange seeing you without your lovely husband," she remarked. "What do you mean? I'm not without him," Ramona clarified. "Hune's just at work, and why are you asking about him anyway?" "I didn't mean anything by it. You're simply fortunate to have someone who loves you so deeply," Kelly assured her. "Most guys out there are only interested in their own pleasure and eventually drift away." "If only someone looked at me the way your husband looks at you," Kelly began before being cut off. "It doesn't matter," Ramona interjected. Aware that I would be occupied with work all day again, Ramona sought solace in returning to the bar she had visited the previous night. She could probably enjoy a drink and be back home before I arrived. Upon entering the bar, Ramona was greeted by someone's embrace. "Oh my God, Ramona, it's been ages," exclaimed Kathleen Kinnison, one of Ramona's former college acquaintances. "What's been going on with you lately? You've lost quite a bit of weight. I almost didn't recognize you," remarked Kathleen. "How's your husband doing?" she inquired. "He can't," Ramona responded. "Just hanging out and having a good time." They approached a table and were soon joined by a group of men. Ramona got up to dance with one of them, becoming so engrossed that she failed to notice the door opening. Everyone in the bar noticed when Kelly walked in. Ramona was too absorbed in dancing to notice her, but Kelly observed her actions and companions. Kelly ordered a sandwich from the grill, returning to work with a newfound idea. In the following days, I maintained my usual workload while also planning Ramona's surprise party. I invited her mother, sister, and several friends, purchased gifts, and hoped the celebration and trip would rekindle our relationship. I was pleasantly surprised when my mother-in-law offered to assist me with decorating the apartment for the party. During Ramona's hospitalization, we grew closer, and while she may not have harbored romantic feelings for me, she respected my love for her daughter and accepted me. Over the subsequent days, I noticed a recurring pattern. Ramona consistently left and returned home late, and our once vibrant bed life dwindled. It was difficult to recall the last time we had been carnal. Women persistently bothered me as if they sensed my need for relief. One evening, upon returning from work, the phone rang. "Hey Brad, it's Kelly," she said. "Hi Kelly. Any news on Ramona's test results?" I inquired. "Not until tomorrow, but there's something important I need to discuss with you," she said urgently. "Could we meet somewhere? It won't take long." "How about the park across from the hospital?" I suggested. Kelly considered it and agreed. "I can be there in 20 minutes if that works for you." "See you there," I confirmed. Kelly believed the park was an ideal meeting spot. During Ramona's hospitalization, she and Brad frequented it to lift his spirits, sharing impromptu dinners while Ramona underwent procedures he couldn't attend. It held happy memories for them, and Kelly didn't want to taint that. Sitting on a small bench in the park beside Kelly, I greeted her with a smile. "Am I behind on payments?" "Is Ramona sick again?" I inquired. "Yes, she's unwell, but it's not cancer," Kelly revealed. In the ensuing minutes, Kelly recounted the places she had spotted my wife recently, detailing her actions and company. "I don't have evidence, but it seems she's being unfaithful," she disclosed. "Kelly, you're a great nurse, and I thought you were a good person too." "Ramona would never do that." "She loves me," I asserted, though my conviction wavered. "I'm sorry to have to say this, but you need to be cautious," Kelly advised. "I can't believe she'd betray you like this," I retorted. "You're basing this on vague suspicions, no evidence. Perhaps it's best for you to focus on your own affairs." I rose to depart, but Kelly seized my hand. Gently, she lifted her hand and grazed my cheek. I found myself frozen in place, my anger dissipating. "I hope I'm mistaken for your sake," Kelly murmured softly. "It pains me to think you're enduring such agony for someone who isn't worth it." Her touch sent a shiver down my spine. "I'll be there for you when you need a friend," she assured, slipping a business card into my hand before leaving. I tucked the card into my pocket, watching as Kelly walked away. It had been a while since Ramona and I had been carnal, yet watching Kelly walk away, I felt a surge of desire. Everything unfolded better than expected. Kelly believed that if Brad discovered the truth too late, the pain would be worse. It was preferable to endure a few small blows rather than one devastating blow. Though she would never intentionally damage Brad, he needed to know about his unfaithful wife. Kelly couldn't pinpoint when her feelings for Brad had blossomed. It no longer mattered. Perhaps it was during those moments when she witnessed his unwavering dedication. Whether caring for Ramona or enduring her dismissive treatment after she started to recover, treating him more like a servant than a devoted husband who had sacrificed everything to be by her side for months. Kelly was aware of her beauty, a fact reiterated throughout her life. Despite her history with numerous men, none had bestowed upon her the same love and tenderness Brad showered upon Ramona. She couldn't fathom anything she wouldn't sacrifice to have such affection in her life. She felt prepared for the next phase of her plan. Returning home 2 nights later, I felt a surge of anticipation. The modest party was intended to ignite the romantic spark with Ramona anew. As I paid closer attention to our interactions in recent days, I noticed her growing distance and increased drink consumption. As I eventually drifted off to sleep, she had yet to return. Upon awakening, she was already asleep beside me, smiling as she rolled over. Despite knowing she was likely out drinking and partying, it was quintessentially Ramona. Initially averse to parties when we first met, she now sought to explore experiences she had once shunned, perhaps as a celebration of her triumph over cancer. While I simply wished for her to celebrate alongside me, I couldn't shake the feeling of my own selfishness. At 6:30, Ramona's mother, Maddie, arrived with her second daughter, Rana. They swiftly began decorating the house, aware that Ramona could arrive at any moment. Only 6 individuals were invited, as I aimed for a cozy gathering with close friends. By 9 p.m., guests were already wondering about Ramona's absence, prompting some to leave their gifts and depart. By 11 p.m., only Maddie, Rana, and I remained. I made a 4th attempt to reach Ramona on her cell phone. She returned the call half an hour later. "Hey love, I'll be heading home soon." Ramona's voice sounded breathless and intoxicated. "Where are you?" I inquired. Mom suggested grabbing a drink and I opted to join her rather than returning home. "We lost track of time," she explained. "I ended up tagging along with her and my disagreeable sister because they still harbor some dislike toward you. And I didn't want their negativity to spoil whatever surprise you had planned," she added. In the background, a male voice urged her to return promptly for some fun. "We'll reunite soon and you can unveil your surprise," she reassured. "Is it a big surprise?" she queried. "Somewhat," I responded softly. For a while, silence lingered. Then Maddie turned her gaze toward me, noticing my struggle to hold back tears. I felt stunned, as if my world had crumbled, unsure of how to react. "That's not entirely accurate," Maddie began. "Initially, I may have had doubts about your suitability for Ramona, but my perspective has shifted," she continued. "What a nerve," Rana interjected. "Thank you both for coming," I said, composing myself. "I'll tidy up and stow away Ramona's gifts," I assured them. "She'll likely return soon." "You're welcome to stay, though I'm not sure witnessing her homecoming will serve any purpose," I added. "Why not?" Rana inquired. "As her sister, I'd relish seeing her reaction when she's confronted with her lie. She endured a harrowing battle with cancer," I explained. "We don't fully understand its impact. All we can do is support her and hope for the best," I concluded softly. Maddie and Rana departed, shaking their heads. I gathered clothes and personal items from the closet, swiftly packing to minimize return trips. Leaving a note for Ramona on the kitchen table, I ensured I had everything I needed to stay away for a while. The following day, I began seeking a divorce lawyer during work breaks, perusing online ads without making any calls. My colleagues assumed I was battling a cold or flu, as I maintained a distant demeanor. Despite Ramona's attempts to contact me, I remained unresponsive, adhering to this routine for 3 consecutive days: work, return to the motel room, sleep, and repeat. On the 3rd day, Kelly perched on the hood of my car as I exited the building, her eyes brimming with tears, leaving me perplexed. "Why didn't you call me?" she demanded, her voice edged with frustration. I remained silent, meeting her gaze, and the emotional barrier I'd constructed shattered, tears streaming down my face. "Everything you warned me about turned out to be true," I confessed softly. Kelly leaped off the car, enveloping me in a hug. Despite my turmoil, I couldn't ignore the inappropriate surge of arousal as her chest pressed against mine. "I never intended to cause you pain. If you can, please forgive me," she pleaded. Meanwhile, Ramona surveyed her cluttered apartment, her head throbbing with pain. "What day is it?" she groaned. "Brad needs to tidy up this mess when he gets back. Why isn't he home yet? Who's knocking?" Rising from her seat, she limped, undressed, to the door, peering through the peephole. "Phew, it's just Mom," she muttered, hastily donning a robe and opening the door. "Sorry for the chaos, Mom," she apologized. "Brad seems to vanish into thin air at work," she added. "Ramona, where were you? What were you up to?" Maddie inquired, her tone accusatory. "Or judging by your appearance, who were you engaging in illicit activities with?" she continued. "Mom, what on earth are you talking about?" Ramona snapped. "Ramona, why do you have hickeys on your neck?" Maddie pressed. "Oh, darn it. Brad better not see this," Ramona muttered. "Mom, could you fetch me some coffee? My head is pounding," she requested. Reluctantly, Maddie retreated to the kitchen to prepare coffee. "So, how did you cover up your deception that night?" Maddie inquired. "What deception, Mom?" questioned Ramona. "The falsehoods you told your husband on your birthday," Maddie clarified. "Ramona, when you claimed you were with me and your sister, we were right here beside him at that moment," Maddie reminded her. Ramona's eyes widened. "I need to think of something to say before he returns," she realized. "You have to help me devise a plan, Mom." "Why should I?" Maddie challenged. "Mom, I acknowledge that I made some mistakes," Ramona admitted, "but it was all just for fun. I wanted to experience things I never could when I was younger," she explained. "Back then, I was overweight, Mom, always the chubby friend, never the desired one," she recounted. "Then I met Brad and everything changed," she continued. "I grew more confident. I started dressing better because to him, I was the attractive one. But to him, I was simply an attractive woman solely because he loves me. But now that I've shed the weight, I'm attracting the attention of more guys, which is invigorating," she confessed. "Now I can flirt with them a bit and discard them." Whenever I please. Now I have options, and it's exhilarating, she admitted. It's not serious. I would never actually leave Brad because I love him. I'm just having a bit of fun, she assured. But you yourself said, Mom, that he's average and dull. And Brad will never find out anyway, she reasoned. Hyun's always working anyway, she added. He should join the game, otherwise he risks losing me. Just like now, he ought to be home by now, she concluded. That's probably accurate, Maddie murmured softly. She approached Ramona and handed her the note discovered in the kitchen. Dear Ramona, I'm genuinely happy to see you enjoying yourself after what you've endured. You deserve it. Beating cancer is a feat few achieve, but you entered the battle and emerged victorious. You didn't just overcome it, you annihilated it. In fact, you've emerged as an even stronger, more radiant individual than before. Right from the start, I recognized your uniqueness and fell deeply in love with you. Now you possess the confidence to step out and reveal to the world just how extraordinary you are and how immense your heart is. You deserve that too. Now I comprehend that there's simply no place for me in your life or your heart. After all, you won my heart long ago, and you deserve to continue moving forward. I hope you receive this note tonight and reach out so we can discuss our next steps, if there are any. If I don't hear from you tonight, I'll assume the worst and proceed with filing for divorce to grant you freedom from me. You can keep the apartment because I still won't be able to return there. There are too many memories. I simply hope your next partner is more deserving of you than I am. I gave it my all, did everything I could for you. Obviously, I fell short somewhere, and you deserve better. I'll always cherish you. Brad. After reading the letter, Ramona collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Maddie glanced at her daughter and reflected, what a foolish daughter I've raised. Across town, Kelly escorted Brad to her home. She circled the car, opening the door and gently tugging his limp arms to help him out. Guiding him to her door, she ushered him inside and settled him onto the sofa. She initiated a conversation with him, recognizing that he had been operating on autopilot for days, merely going through the motions, but now he had hit rock bottom. Despite his outward appearance, she believed he possessed much greater strength than he realized. I'm going to assist him in breaking free from this deceitful woman, Kelly understood. Now wasn't the time to disclose any remaining details about Ramona to him. A detective agency had been monitoring Brad and Ramona for the past week. She knew the precise date and time he had left her, but decided to allow him a few days before confronting him. Ramona had engaged in far more than Brad was aware of, and Kelly wasn't certain if his delicate mental state could withstand it. Leaving Brad seated on the couch, she changed into more comfortable attire and prepared dinner, consisting of steaks and salad. While she enjoyed her meal, Brad pushed his food around his plate contemplatively. Throughout the entire meal, neither of them uttered a single word. After dinner, Kelly deliberately turned off Brad's cell phone, ensuring there were no messages. Yet this indicated that Ramona was still too intoxicated to realize his absence, which was a positive sign. Kelly then called the hospital, informing them she would be absent for personal reasons, and encouraged Brad to do the same. Despite Brad's reluctance due to financial obligations, Kelly insisted, and eventually he agreed to take 2 days off. Kelly provided him with a blanket and settled him on the couch, embracing him like a child and planting a kiss on his forehead. If you need me, I'm here, she assured him, gesturing toward her bedroom upstairs. Meanwhile, that evening, Ramona attempted to reach Brad's cell phone 20 times, frustrated by his lack of response. She desperately needed to explain herself, emphasizing that she didn't desire a divorce and couldn't bear to live without him. Brad was her pillar of strength, her unwavering support. Despite her recent actions, she maintained that her marriage was paramount. Brad's love had been steadfast, even during her times of struggle, when she was overweight and overlooked by others. Recalling their joint battle against cancer, she realized their victory was a collective effort. She reminisced about countless memories with Brad, including the day he shaved his head in solidarity with her. Feeling foolish, she attempted to reach him again, this time calling his workplace. To her surprise, she learned that Brad had taken a couple of days off and had been assigned a new office since his recent promotion. Ramona felt a pang of guilt, realizing that Brad's return might not unfold as she had anticipated. Until then, she had assumed he was simply upset and sulking. She could resolve his anger by simply calling him and asking him to return home. Once he arrived, a brief conversation and closeness would mend everything. She envisioned spending the remainder of their lives together, making amends to him. Reflecting on the past few hours, she realized that her recent indulgence wasn't worth jeopardizing her relationship with Brad. She had initially been level-headed. How had she regressed into the type of foolish girl she had disdained in college? Initially seeking a bit of enjoyment and self-care, she now recognized her lack of control over the situation. Surrendering to the allure of unfamiliar men offered only an illusion of control at the expense of what she should have reserved for Brad. There was no love involved, only hollow, intoxicated encounters. Now she was left to ponder the extent of Brad's knowledge and what forgiveness he might require. Conversely, she doubted she could ever forgive herself for her actions. She had become the very thing she despised most. Kelly carefully and gradually assisted Brad. They retrieved his belongings from the hotel and purchased what he needed. At Kelly's urging, they relocated his possessions to a guest room in her home. She encouraged him to speak, initially coaxing out only a few words, but soon engaging in earnest conversation. However, the topic of Ramona remained untouched. As their 2-day respite concluded and both had to resume work, she returned his cell phone to him, observing silently. She watched as he sifted through his messages. Despite over 100 calls from Ramona, he deleted them all without listening. His jaw clenched, indicating a newfound resolve, and she believed he would eventually be all right. Upon returning to work, Brad felt somewhat improved, though his senses remained unsettled. Some coworkers had noticed Kelly picking him up recently, sparking a wave of gossip. "So Brad, who was behind the wheel of that red Mustang?" queried his friend Dave. "Brad's got a supermodel by his side," another colleague chimed in. Brad grinned but stayed silent. Undoubtedly, Kelly possessed striking beauty, perhaps even surpassing Ramona's. Did he genuinely believe that? Brad's cheerful demeanor was evident when someone insinuated he was having an affair with a mysterious redhead. Oblivious to Ramona's infidelity, all seemed well until it was time to depart for home. A security guard barged into Brad's office, urgently summoning him to the parking lot. Brad feared his car had been damaged. He was unprepared for the chaos that awaited. Shrill cries pierced the air before he reached the lot. "What the hell are you doing on my husband's car, you homewrecker?" Ramona's voice echoed. "You abandoned him with your disappearing act," Kelly retorted sharply. "What are you even talking about?" Ramona shot back. "You vanished into drinks and betrayed him," Kelly spat. Guards intervened to keep the women apart, but a crowd had already gathered. Brad approached Kelly, guiding her to the Mustang. He quietly instructed her to head home and assured her he would follow shortly. Then he directed the guards to detain Ramona for at least 10 minutes before driving off after Kelly. As he departed, Brad witnessed Ramona's anguished cries of surprise. Despite his deepening love for her, anger now welled within him. "Brad, we need to talk," her voice echoed. "We'll figure it out. You still care for me, I can see it," she insisted. Regrettably, she wasn't entirely wrong. With tears streaming down his face, Brad walked away. Later at Kelly's residence, Brad was prepared to confront the situation. "What's your plan, Brad?" Kelly inquired. "I suppose I need clarity about my marriage," Brad responded. "Are you certain you want to know?" Kelly questioned. "Absolutely," Brad affirmed. "I'm not so sure," Kelly admitted. Retrieving a large envelope from her office, she placed it on the table. "Everything you need is in here, but I urge you not to open it," she cautioned. "What's inside?" Brad inquired. "When I first came to you about her, you said I lacked proof," Kelly recounted, "and you were correct. Despite what I witnessed, I struggled to accept it, just like when it happened to me," Kelly confessed. "Anticipating your need for evidence, I arranged for a private investigator to tail her. Fortunately, my cousin owed me a favor, so it didn't cost me a dime. I've stitched it up several times. There's a stack of photos, audio clips, receipts, reports, and even footage. But, trust me, if there's any love left for her in your heart, you're better off not seeing this," Kelly advised. "By now you understand the evidence is concrete, confirming her breach of marital vows. Yet viewing it will only inflict more pain," she cautioned. "Once you witness it firsthand, it'll haunt you for a long, long while," she added. "You're starting to grasp this. I know it'll take time to move on from her, but you're beginning to see reason," she said optimistically. "This file can only drag you back. However, do what you deem necessary," she concluded. "What should we have for dinner?" Kelly inquired, heading toward the kitchen. Brad reached for the folder and extracted the initial photo, a clear depiction of Ramona lying on a table in what seemed to be a bar, her dress hitched up to her waist. Up to this point, there were at least 3 men. Brad found his split from Ramona excruciating, yet the photograph dealt a devastating blow. He struggled to focus or even breathe. Returning the photo to its folder and hurling it across the room, he collapsed onto Kelly's couch. He shut his eyes, feeling her embrace. For the remainder of the night, they sat in silence. The following morning, claiming illness, they visited a divorce attorney Kelly recommended. "I'll aim to expedite this with minimal pain," assured Sherry, Brad's new attorney. You lack children and own scarce assets except for medical expenses. I'll cover those, Brad offered. Why? Inquired Sherry. Given your substantial debt due to her, she elaborated, and her repayment acting in such a manner, well, you know, she added. Regardless, this should be straightforward. If she contests, we'll threaten to expose the file, Sherry proposed. The paperwork will be ready within days. Over the ensuing days, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Ramona received the divorce papers and promptly tore them apart. Not only did she refuse to sign or even read them, but she also declined to seek legal counsel. She informed Sherry that she would vehemently contest the divorce and vowed it would never happen. Instead, she proposed a legal separation, suggesting that after a year of mutual agreement, divorce proceedings could commence. In return, she requested marriage counseling and implored Brad to return home to salvage their relationship. Threatening to cite infidelity as grounds for divorce, which could tarnish Ramona's reputation if evidence surfaced, Sherry warned her. Ramona scoffed at the threat, demanding Sherry devise something substantial. I've made it clear, she snapped. I'll stop at nothing to prevent this. If you need to go to Rome and inform the Pope that I'm unfaithful, I'll purchase your plane ticket. But no one, especially you or that redhead, will take my husband without a fight, she declared. She also refused to entertain any alternative proposals until she could speak with Brad. She's being unreasonable, Sherry later remarked to Brad. In your shoes, I'd attend the meeting. Refusing to communicate with her could reflect poorly in court. 2 days later, Brad found himself face-to-face with Ramona in Sherry's office. Why are you doing this to us? She inquired. You brought this upon us, Ramona, he replied calmly. All right, I may have gotten carried away, drank excessively, and neglected you, she admitted. I understand why you're upset, she acknowledged, but that doesn't justify throwing away the 10 years we've spent together, she said earnestly. I love you, Brad. You have to believe me, Ramona pleaded. You forget that you lied to me, betrayed my trust, and shattered my heart, Brad countered. You did things I never imagined you capable of. You didn't consider my feelings at all, Ramona, he added. It was all about you and your gratification. But Brad, I battled cancer. You can't understand what that's like, she said sadly. And after overcoming that, I just wanted to experience life for a while, she explained. After conquering something like that, perspectives and priorities shift, she reasoned. Ramona, I comprehend your perspective, but you're mistaken, Brad responded. And now you'll have all the time in the world to explore life to your heart's content. I won't trouble you anymore. You can do whatever you want. You can entertain entire crowds of men every night and nobody will object, Brad declared as he rose and walked away, prompting Ramona to start yelling after him. Brad, you can't just abandon me. What do you mean I'm mistaken? Brad reclined in his chair and gestured for Ramona to join him. Ramona, you didn't have cancer, Brad stated solemnly. What? She started, but Brad raised his hand to silence her. We had cancer, he said, tears welling in his eyes. I was there every damn day in the hospital, he snapped. Only it was worse for me. You felt it, but they gave you medicine for the pain, he remarked. I had to sit there and watch illness devastate the person I loved most, powerless to do anything. But I had to watch. There were times when I felt so guilty that I was ready to do anything, Brad recounted. If I could take your place, I would, he confessed. And I could, but I never left you, he assured her. I had to. Pretend to be cheerful so that you could maintain hope and good spirits, he disclosed. But inside, I was dying a little every day. Every night when they forced me to leave you, I went home and cried for hours, he revealed. I was so afraid of losing you and not spending the rest of our lives together. And then every morning I had to put on a cheerful, confident expression again. When it was all over, having gone through it, as you put it, I was just as ready to explore life and have fun, he stated. But the person I wanted to have fun with was busy drinking, and apparently other men besides the husband who went through it with her, he recounted, while she looked at her feet. And one of us had to work hard to start paying all your medical expenses, he added. So, you have a new body and a new way of looking at things, and I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. You have new priorities, and my wife is a cheater. You have a new point of view, but from the side you were looking at, you probably didn't see how you were hurting me, he pointed out. You have to explore life, and I'm heartbroken, Brad said. You claim to love me, how do you think I'll feel when I hear about all the guys you've had involving with? He questioned. I'm sure they're all great guys, Ramona. But where were they when you were in the hospital dying? He asked again. Cancer may not have eliminated your body, but the consequences certainly eliminated our marriage, he said seriously. Maybe it wasn't cancer, but just you, he said quietly. Sign the damn papers, Ramona. I have nothing more to say to you ever. Brad left the room. Ramona remained seated in a chair for an extended period, tears streaming down her face. Outside the lawyer's office, Kelly observed Brad's difficult meeting and realized he didn't need further exacerbation of his depression. Clearly distressed, Brad wasn't up for conversation or anything else. Approaching Kelly's 2003 Mustang SVT Cobra, she tossed him the keys. Brad cherished this car. Renowned as the Terminator in 2003, it held the title of the fastest production Mustang for quite some time. "Drive us home," she said, offering a smile. "Eventually, whether she signs the papers or not, your divorce will proceed." "Can we just take a little ride?" Brad inquired. "No," Kelly responded. "We have a lifetime ahead for adventures. Right now, you're hurting, and I need to get some food into you," she insisted. Parking the car in Kelly's driveway, they exited and entered her home. Brad stole a final glance at the car. Driving it a bit longer would have been enjoyable. Kelly entered the house ahead of him, shedding her coat onto the living room floor. As Brad observed her slow stride across the room, he noticed she had already discarded her coat. Ascending the stairs to her bedroom, Kelly removed her blouse while maintaining eye contact, a smile playing on her lips. Step by step, she shed her shoes. Then halfway up, her tights, dangling them teasingly. Reaching the top, she dropped her skirt, leaving it behind. Brad marveled at the expanse of her fair skin on display, a realization dawning upon him that he was still alive after weeks of emotional turmoil. Hastily ascending the stairs, he collected his discarded clothes along the way, a reflexive action. Upon reaching the landing, he found Kelly waiting, engaged in an enigmatic feminine ritual. Kelly unfastened her bra, setting free her chest, which seemed to pulse with anticipation. Brad struggled to draw breath as he gazed at her, his thoughts becoming increasingly difficult to collect. "Come get me," she beckoned, darting down the corridor. Suddenly, Brad grasped the wisdom of the great American press secretary George Clinton in his iconic creation, Atomic Dog. "Why should I be like this? Why should I chase a cat?" It all became clear. Brad pursued Kelly to her bedroom, finding her poised on the bed. She knelt before him, methodically disrobing him. Each bared body part received her deliberate attention as their garments accumulated on the floor. As the clothing pile grew, anticipation mounted for the carnal connection awaiting them. "Kelly, Brad began, but she silenced him with a gesture. While Ramona embodied softness and submission in closeness, Kelly unleashed wild passion. She engaged fervently, conveying her complete devotion to Brad. She made it known that she was his anytime, anywhere, forever. They explored every conceivable pleasure, and ultimately, Kelly achieved her objective. She redirected Brad's focus from Ramona and the past to herself and their future. Kelly's former husband's infidelity taught her that some men would betray anyone, even a woman as beautiful as herself. Recalling his words when caught for the last time, "A woman, no matter how beautifully she is wrapped, becomes stale after a while, and you need to find a fresh one." Kelly promptly ended the relationship. She had longed for someone to cherish her as Brad did Ramona, believing he was the one. With Ramona's loss, Kelly seized her opportunity, vowing to treat Brad with the love and respect he deserved. Weeks later, Ramona remained defiant, refusing to sign the papers and plotting to catch Brad with Kelly to sabotage his divorce petition. She believed this retaliation would restore balance and reunite them, as they should have been. However, she hoped it wouldn't be prolonged, yearning for Brad's presence and feeling unwell herself. Nobody seemed to show concern for her anymore. When Brad returned home, he would lift her spirits, make love to her, and attend to household chores to restore her well-being. Above all, he would reignite her sense of importance. Though it might take time, they would overcome this setback. However, one day she inadvertently spotted Brad and Kelly at a restaurant. Observing them through the window, Kelly reached across the table, tenderly, caressing Brad's cheek. He reciprocated by holding her hand and planting a kiss on it. Brad didn't follow Ramona's anticipated course of action. He didn't engage in a physical relationship with Kelly as Ramona had with others. It became evident to Ramona that Brad was deeply enamored with Kelly. Realizing what she had forsaken, Ramona unraveled, bursting into the restaurant. She screamed at Kelly to stay away from her husband, hurling insults. "You're the one who let him slip away," Kelly retorted. "No, I didn't mean to," Ramona insisted. "I was just seeking amusement. I never intended for him to leave me." "You won't win over my husband," Ramona continued to scream. "He would already be mine if you would just sign those papers." "Not in a million years," Ramona screamed again. "I'll stop you first." As onlookers observed, Ramona's complexion drained and she grew faint, struggling to remain upright. Eventually, she sank to the floor, declaring she felt unwell. Regaining her composure, she exited the restaurant. 3 months later, Brad and Kelly tied the knot. True to her word, Ramona never signed the divorce papers. Her cancer resurged, and she was readmitted to the hospital. Despite receiving excellent care, the absence of someone by her side to support her in battling the illness made it unbearable. She lost her will to live, spending her hospital days inquiring about Brad or penning letters to him, pleading for forgiveness or simply asking for a visit. Brad offered to see her if she would agree to sign the papers. This time, the cancer battle was swift and merciless, with Ramona deteriorating rapidly over a month before passing away. Brad and Kelly attended her funeral. Brad delivered a poignant eulogy, expressing his deep affection for Ramona and reminiscing about their cherished moments together. He chose not to dwell on their separation, focusing instead on the positive aspects of their relationship. In a touching gesture, he revealed to the handful of relatives in attendance that he and Kelly had decided to name their expected child after Ramona. On some evenings, whether lounging by the fireplace or cruising in his 2012 Laguna 302 Mustang, Brad came to a realization: both he and Ramona had been mistaken. Ramona had claimed victory over cancer, leading Brad to believe they had conquered the disease together. However, the truth was that Ramona had only recently been diagnosed with cancer. Upon leaving the hospital, she underwent a drastic transformation. She became loud, angry, and destructive, wreaking havoc on everything and everyone around her, including her marriage, her relationship with Brad, and her family. Eventually, when she couldn't achieve her desires, she turned her destructive tendencies inward. As for Brad and Kelly, they lived happily ever after.
My lover got out of bed and went to his adjoining hotel room to get ready for the day. We always booked 2 adjoining rooms with a connecting door to avoid suspicion. It wouldn't be good if our affair was discovered. I was Dan's executive assistant, and we had worked together for over 2 years, being lovers for most of that time. Due to my role, we often traveled together across the country for meetings and conferences, giving us plenty of time together without raising eyebrows. I was married, and my husband stayed at home. My marriage was a fast wedding at 18 after I got pregnant by my high school boyfriend, Alan. When our parents found out, mine wanted me to adopt the baby, but his parents insisted we keep her and offered their help. Alan supported me through the pregnancy despite the judgment from others. After a difficult labor, we welcomed our daughter, Lauren, 2 days after my 19th birthday, and decided to keep her. My parents nearly disowned me, so we moved in with Alan's parents, who helped raise Lauren. After graduating, we both got jobs, married in a simple ceremony, and moved into a small house. Our plans for university were postponed when we had another daughter, Emma. Over the next decade, with hard work and support, we both earned university degrees while working part-time and raising our daughters. Alan was very close to the girls, but my relationship with them was strained. We often fought, and I sometimes resented them, blaming them for the life I had to give up. After graduation, I became the executive assistant to Dan Johnson, the business development manager for a medical device company. I was 32, and he was 41. We quickly became a strong professional team, and I loved my job. Sales were increasing, management was happy, and I got a raise. My job involved a lot of travel, often with Dan, which was exciting. We visited new places, met clients, negotiated deals, and interacted with executives. Though I was away from home 3 weeks out of 4, the experience was fantastic. Dan and I spent a lot of time together and became close despite our age difference. He was married with 3 young children. To prevent Alan from worrying about my travels, I lied that I mostly traveled alone or with another woman and downplayed my relationship with Dan. In truth, I was fascinated and attracted to Dan. We often found cozy restaurants for dinner, wine, and long conversations. About 6 months in, after landing a big sales order, we celebrated with a special dinner and champagne. That night, Dan confessed his love for me. My heart raced, and after a moment of hesitation, I followed him to his room. We spent the night together. The next morning, I felt guilty but justified it as an experience I deserved since I hadn't had the chance to explore relationships when I was younger. I also realized I had forgotten Emma's 11th birthday the night before. Despite the guilt, I acknowledged my involvement as Dan smiled and squeezed my hand on the plane home. When I got home, the guilt hit me again. Alan was happy to see me after a week away, but I avoided his hugs and kisses. That night, I declined his advances, claiming I was tired, though I was also sore from being with Dan. It was the first time I had ever turned Alan down. Our affair, which began 18 months ago, continued nonstop. Over time, I got over the guilt and hid my secret from Alan, emotionally disconnecting from him and our girls. My thoughts were always about Dan. Lying became second nature, and I didn't feel guilty anymore. I had fallen deeply in love with Dan and occasionally thought about leaving Alan for him. As our company expanded, Dan and I traveled more often for work. When there were no scheduled trips, we created fake business trips and spent the night in a nearby hotel. We also took short vacations together, using conferences as an alibi. We were careful at work, always behaving professionally and never meeting alone. We communicated through secret email accounts and never met in our town. At home, I argued with Alan about my demanding boss and frequent travel. He often suggested finding a job with less travel, but I told him I was learning too much and earning well. During rare work events with partners, we were very cautious, briefly introducing our spouses before mingling with others. No one suspected anything. Alan was happy with my career success, but annoyed by my frequent absences, which left him to handle most of the child-rearing on top of his IT job. Although I still loved Alan, we were drifting apart, and our affection had dwindled. I felt guilty and made a mental note to try to make it up to him.
We had a rough start in life early on, having our first child at 16, getting married at 18, and having another shortly thereafter. Through hard work and teamwork, we managed to graduate from university, me with a degree in information technology and Amy with a degree in commerce, all while raising 2 girls. We overlooked the difficulties because we loved each other deeply. When Amy got her first professional job after graduation about 2 years ago, she was overjoyed, and I was very proud of her. Finally, we were both working professionally, earning a good salary, and could begin enjoying a normal life together. At first, I supported her career in every way I could, but I grew increasingly resentful of the long hours she worked and the amount of traveling she did. She left home around 7 in the morning and usually didn't get home until 6 or 7 in the evening. Most weeks, she would be gone for at least 1 or 2 nights, sometimes more. And occasionally, she wouldn't get home until Saturday afternoon. When she was home during the week, she either worked after dinner or just sat in front of the TV. On Saturdays, she would sleep late and then go shopping. On Sundays, she would go to the gym in the morning and then have lunch with her girlfriends. She was usually too tired to go out with me in the evening. We didn't spend much family time together. She was always too busy at work to take vacations, so the girls and I often vacationed without her. I noticed that her character was changing. The loving wife and mother was gone, replaced by a selfish, often irritated, and aloof person sharing my bed. Whenever I tried to bring it up, I was immediately rebuffed. She would say it was just my imagination, or that she was tired from work, or she was working hard for us, or that everything was fine. I worried about how it might end. At the end of her first year, I was required to accompany her to a Christmas party at the CEO's mansion. It was there that I first met her boss, Dan, and his wife. We chatted politely but briefly about nothing. Then he bowed out and they went off to socialize. My wife led me to others and started a conversation with the other employees. Later, I thought it was a bit odd. Her boss seemed quite friendly, though a bit reserved, not the ogre Amy had described. Dan's wife was also very pleasant. Since Amy was his executive assistant, I thought we would have more than just polite, cursory conversation. I also sensed that Amy was a little tense. She had a habit of talking really fast when she was nervous, and it gave her away. I thought it was odd that she was nervous around her boss when they worked so closely together. It was perplexing to me. Although I trusted her completely, I still put the thought aside for later. Over the next year, I was very busy as I decided to start my own IT consulting company. Additionally, I was practically single-handedly raising our girls, so I pushed all concerns about Amy to the back burner. Life with Amy was a repeat of the previous year. She started traveling even more often and becoming more distant from all 3 of us. Lately, I began to notice that her attitude toward me was becoming condescending and dismissive. She showed me no love, no affection, nothing. Only occasionally did I receive something without any love or closeness. It was obvious that our relationship was crumbling. At the end of the year, I again attended her staff Christmas party. Our interaction with her boss was a repeat of the previous meeting. Afterward, a fleeting thought crossed my mind that she was hiding something. For the first time since we met at 18, I began to doubt her. Was there another man in her life? The thought was almost overwhelming. We had fought together as a team, overcoming many challenges to get where we were. Now she wouldn't do that, would she? What was I supposed to do? I didn't go to the extreme of hiring a private investigator or hacking into her computer, but I began to observe her more closely. I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Either it was my imagination, or she was very clever at covering her tracks. Either way, all was not well between us. I guess I was just too busy to bother. Meanwhile, my girls were growing up rapidly. We spent a lot of time together and were very close, although, unfortunately, their mother had little time for them. Both girls were avid soccer players, so every Saturday morning during the season, I went to watch them play. It was the highlight of my week. After the game, we would go out for lunch somewhere, usually to their favorite Japanese restaurant, and chat about what they were doing. I noticed that they almost never mentioned their mother. Afterwards, depending on the weather, we would walk on the beach, go to the movies, or go out with friends. After the first game of the season was over, Emma came up to me accompanied by a new member of the soccer team. She was a charming girl, tall, absolutely beautiful, with a wide smile, long dark hair, and deep dark brown eyes. She was also very athletic and had distinguished herself in her first game with Emma's team, scoring 2 goals. "Hi, Daddy. This is Callie. Can I come over and hang out with her this afternoon?" "Hi, Callie. Nice to meet you." "Sure, Emma, as long as Callie's parents don't mind." Callie turned and called out, "Mom, can Emma come over this afternoon?" The woman, obviously Callie's mom, turned and started walking toward us. Holy crap! She was the adult version of her daughter and absolutely stunningly beautiful. She introduced herself as Sophie and readily agreed to have Emma come to her house in the afternoon. We chatted for a while, but I'm still not sure exactly what I said. I know I babbled incoherently. After they left, both my girls burst into laughter at my embarrassment and then smirked at each other. In the evening, Emma mentioned that Sophie was very nice. Sophie had been a single mom since Callie's father died in a car accident about 3 years ago. Sophie single-handedly raised Callie and her younger brother Tom for 11 years. The fact that she was a single mom definitely caught my attention. The following Saturday, as Lauren and I were watching Emma play soccer, Sophie and her son joined us and asked if they could watch with us. I mentally prepared myself to meet her again and was determined not to look foolish. We chatted during the game. She had recently moved to town for a new job and didn't know many people yet. She was very happy that Callie had made a new friend in Emma and complimented me on my good manners. After the match, Emma asked if Callie could come to our house. "Sure, Emma, that would be great if that's okay with you, Sophie." "Sure. Why don't Callie come over now and have lunch with us? Do you like sushi?" "Yes, I love it." "Great, it's a deal. In fact, why don't all 3 of you have lunch with us?" I muttered. "Thank you so much for the invitation, Alan. But I'll be in the way of your family, so I won't be coming." I was feeling a little overwhelmed when Lauren spoke up. "No, please come, Sophie. It would be really nice to have you with us, and I'd get a woman to talk to for a change. You would be absolutely out of the way, please." She looked at me. "If you're sure I won't get in the way, Alan, that would be wonderful." I shook my head and mumbled something incoherent again as we turned to walk to our cars. Lauren turned to me with a smirk and winked. Lunch was a great success. We, meaning mostly the 4 girls, chatted for almost 2 hours. I think Tom was glad of the other man's company, and we talked a bit amongst ourselves about computers and soccer. At one point, I heard Sophie very casually ask my girls if their mom ever came to watch their soccer games. Lauren's answer surprised me. "No, never. She's not really interested in us. She's only interested in her work and herself. Daddy is our mom, too. He's the only one who cares about us." Sophie cast an inquisitive glance at me. During the rest of the soccer season, we got into the habit of having lunch together after every game. Emma and Callie became close friends and alternated between our houses after the game and sometimes after school. Sometimes Tom would come over with his sister too, but more often than not, he wanted to spend time with me. We often fiddled with computers, kicked a ball around, or rode bikes. I also noticed that Lauren often stopped by Sophie's house, and the 2 of them would sometimes go shopping and then stop for coffee and a chat. I noticed that my girls never mentioned Sophie to their mother, and neither did I. Sophie and I were becoming firm friends too. Since I was pretty much a single parent like her, it was much easier for us to help each other with parenting. After soccer season ended, We were increasingly alone with the kids on Saturdays when they went on their own field trips or to visit friends. When my wife wasn't usually around, I was pretty much free. So increasingly, Sophie and I spent that time in each other's company, walking, eating lunch, or watching movies. I looked forward to our meetings more and more and realized that I had fallen in love with her. Despite this, we never crossed the line of friendship. One day, over a cup of coffee with Sophie, I told her that I appreciated her spending time with Lauren. You know she's never quiet about you when she gets home. Sophie this, Sophie that, I laughed. Well, and Tom is never quiet about you when he comes to see you. Alan this, Alan that, she laughed back. Seriously, he needs a male figure in his life, so I appreciate you spending time with him. Then she suddenly said, Forgive me for being blunt, Alan, but it seems pretty obvious that all is not well between you and your wife. We never discussed Amy. Carefully avoiding the subject, I sat in silence for about 30 seconds. It was a question I had long pushed to the back of my mind and avoided discussing. The truth is, Sophie, if it weren't for the girls, I'd probably be long gone. Things have been really bad for a few years now. I've tried to talk to her many times, but I've hit a brick wall. Our marriage was hard from the beginning. I think Lauren told you about how Amy and I got married. Yes, and she blames herself a bit for putting you in that situation. I know it's crazy, and I tell her it's not her fault in the slightest. That opened the floodgates for me. I spent the next hour pouring out all my sorrows on Sophie. At the end, she came over and gave me a big hug. It was my first real female hug in forever. I'm here for you whenever you need me, Alan. You know that. I only hugged her tighter and didn't let her go. Soon another year was over, and the annual Christmas party for Amy's co-workers came around again. My reacquaintance with her boss was very similar to the previous 2 years. This time, I was on high alert. Although Amy and her boss seemed much more at ease than before, something was not right. I had a definite suspicion about these two. Toward the end of the evening, Amy excused herself to go to the bathroom. After a minute, I looked over and realized that her boss was also nonchalantly heading upstairs. I decided to follow her and went upstairs looking for her. She wasn't in the bathroom, so I looked all around the huge house and was about to pass the ajar bedroom door when I heard my wife's voice inside. "Merry Christmas, dear," a male voice replied. "Merry Christmas, my love." I peeked through the crack of the door and saw Amy and her boss kissing passionately with their arms wrapped around each other. I quickly backed away in shock. I went downstairs pondering what to do. I was beyond angry, feeling just dead inside. I don't have a temper, so instead of an immediate confrontation, I calmed myself and decided to investigate and make a plan first. Amy returned shortly afterward, a little out of breath, and spent the rest of the evening pretending to be my loving wife. I, on the other hand, pretended that nothing had happened. By New Year's Eve, working while Amy slept, I hacked into her phone and laptop. Amy should have known better. Keeping evidence on your personal computer, even if it's well hidden, isn't very smart when your husband's occupation is computer hacking. My worst fears were realized. There was a trail of evidence in her work, personal, and secret email accounts. Amy was in a long-term affair with her boss that began over 2 years ago. I also discovered photos and videos showing the depth of her betrayal. From their email correspondence, I realized that Amy and Dan had even discussed leaving their partners to be together. She seemed interested, but her lover was more cautious. I really was a clueless husband. I installed a covert surveillance program on her phone and laptop. I could remotely monitor her every electronic and physical move if I wanted to. My marriage was clearly over. Now I needed to retain custody of my daughters and protect my business and finances. In the new year, I consulted with a divorce attorney. She told me that divorces are no fault, so you can't sue for infidelity. However, in a child custody case, once the children turn 14, they have the right to decide which parent they want to live with after the marriage breaks up. She also came up with a strategy to protect my company from financial payouts. Emma would turn 14 in 6 months. Until then, I could tolerate living with Amy, and that gave me time to prepare. I had to keep everything a secret from Amy. I told Sophie what I had found out, and she cried. It was unexpected. I thought I should be the one most upset and in need of a hug. I held her for a while as she tearfully told me that her husband had been homicided while driving with his secretary. When she went through his belongings after his pass away, she discovered that they had been having an affair. This made his loss even more difficult. When she recovered, we talked more, and I told her about my plans to leave Amy. She grinned and encouraged me to put my plans into action. I first convinced my wife that since we were both making good money now, we should sell our small house and rent a bigger place. While we looked for our dream home, we would use the money from the sale to put a down payment on a new house. She readily agreed. Our house sold quickly and we rented another place nearby. I was a tenant on a lease for only 6 months. I was very sick of sharing a bed with Amy when she was home. When we moved into the rental house, I got a bad cold. I used that as an excuse to move into the spare room so I wouldn't have to sleep with her. I never moved back in, and she never commented on it. Maybe she didn't notice, or maybe she just liked it. Then I talked my father, whom I also confided in, into starting a new IT company that he himself owned. I was his only employee. I then closed my own company and started running my business through his company. Everything was going according to plan, until I ran into a very nervous and scared Lauren. Lauren was dating her first boyfriend, and I immediately thought she was pregnant, just like what happened to her mom. "Dad, this is hard for me to tell you, but Mom is having an affair with her boss." I was shocked that she knew, and was speechless for a moment. "Really? What makes you think that?" "Well, right after we moved, Emma and I went back to our old house to pick up some things she'd forgotten. Mom and her boss were there." "Well, that's a little weird, but it doesn't prove anything," I said. "I know about their affair, Lauren. I've known for a long time." "Then why don't you do something about this cheating woman? Emma saw her too." "Yes." I called out to Emma, who was hiding within earshot around the corner, and she bashfully entered the room. I hugged them both tightly. I knew how awful it was for them to see this, especially young Emma. "Can you both keep a very big secret?" They nodded. "I plan on leaving your mom soon. I'm just waiting until Emma turns 14 so you both can legally choose who to live with." They both shouted in unison. "It won't be easy to keep this secret, but until then we mustn't do anything to alert your mother." They smiled conspiratorially. Afterwards, I asked Sophie to have a chat with Lauren. She had her first boyfriend now, and I didn't want her to follow in her mother's footsteps. Fortunately, Amy didn't show up often, so we could tolerate her occasional presence and keep our secret. We enjoyed it even more when she wasn't home. Knowing that the end was near, we spent more and more time with Sophie and her 2 children, often having lunch at each other's houses or going out together. One Friday afternoon, when my wife was supposedly at a conference all weekend, but was actually with her boss at the hotel, Lauren said, "Daddy, I'm going to babysit for Sophie today." "Oh, really? What's she doing?" "Going to dinner with a guy at Brazier Paris. You know that classy French restaurant in town?" I immediately felt real jealousy and tried unsuccessfully not to show it. My daughter looked at me with a pitying expression on her face. "She's going on a date with you, you idiot. It's about time you two went on a proper date." "I've already made reservations, so call her now and ask her out properly," she said, holding out her phone to me. "What if she doesn't want to go on a date with me? We're just friends after all. I don't want her to feel awkward. How you ever managed to be smart enough to graduate from university is beyond me. Call her now." I called, and Sophie, judging by the sound of my voice, was absolutely thrilled and immediately agreed. Somehow I got the feeling that it wasn't a surprise. It took me 3 tries that night before my girls were satisfied that I was appropriately dressed for dinner. Just as I was about to leave, Callie and Tom walked in. In response to my perplexed look, Lauren said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you that they'll be spending the night here tonight, so don't worry about coming home late or not at all if you want." She smiled and handed me an already packed overnight bag. All of our children were obviously involved in a determined plot. When I arrived, Sophie met me at the door. "Oh my God, she looked absolutely amazing." "Well, say something, Alan." "I can't. I have no words." "Do you like it?" she asked, twirling around. "Oh, much more than like it, Sophie. I had the best dinner of my life, and we had a wonderful time in each other's company." At the end of the evening, as we walked up to her front door, I said, "I know our children have arranged for me to stay the night, but you don't have to." She said, "Shh, I'm counting on you to stay," and led me inside and into her bedroom. I wasn't going to argue with that. We were a little shy and hesitant at first. I let out all my mental frustrations and felt like I had died and gone to heaven. The next morning, we heard the sound of lots of feet on the stairs, voices outside, and a knock on the bedroom door, which then opened. Lauren poked her head inside. "Good morning, you two. It's almost 10 and we got tired of waiting, so we came in. Breakfast will be ready downstairs in 20 minutes. Oh, and I'd ask if you had a good evening, but judging by the look on your face, there's no need." She grinned. Laughter was heard outside the door and they all departed. "How did we manage to get such a wonderful group of children, Sophie?" The breakfast they made was delicious, and it was wonderful to spend it as a family. Later at home, I tried to justify myself to my girls for what had happened between Sophie and me. After all, technically, I had been unfaithful to their mother. They both just rolled their eyes and laughed at my awkwardness. "Dad, it's about time you were happy again. You're not married to Mom anymore anyway. She left you a long time ago. So what are all you co-conspirators up to?" "Actually, we're all in agreement. Emma and I need a mother and Callie and Tom need a father. You and Sophie are made for each other, so everyone wins." "Even if I thought it was a good idea, Sophie might not—" "Papa, truth. Even you should be able to tell how she feels about you and what she wants." "Do I have any say in the matter?" "No, absolutely none, Daddy." From the looks on their faces, they were thoroughly amused by all of this. Now, I was truly at the mercy of my daughters. A few days later at dinner, when we were all gathered together, I announced that I intended to go house hunting the following weekend. Sophie asked what kind of house I was looking for. I wanted to be close to the beach, 2 stories with a large family room, a kid's escape room, a large backyard, and a pool. It should have at least 6 bedrooms in case my family ever grows, because you never know. Looking directly at her, I said, "I also want to make sure it will appeal to the woman I might fall head over heels in love with." Sophie stared back for a full minute, then walked over to where I was sitting and kissed me passionately in front of the children. When we took a breath, they watched us in silence and then exploded with joy, dancing around us. I took that as a yes. After weeks of searching, we found the perfect place. We decided to buy it jointly. She used her husband's life insurance money, and I used the proceeds from the sale of my house as collateral. Everything was ready for a showdown with Amy as Emma's 14th birthday, and thus D-Day approached. Amy announced that she was leaving for 7 days to attend a sales conference on the West Coast. I later checked her email and discovered that she was actually going on vacation with her boss to celebrate their 3rd wedding anniversary on the island of Bali in Indonesia. To avoid arousing suspicion at work, they independently told everyone that they were going on vacation with their families because they were working so hard that they were neglecting them. She would leave work a day earlier than her boss and fly to Bali alone. He would fly in a day later. She would come back to work a day earlier than her boss to make the script look believable. They were getting lazy. Their gimmicks weren't up to their usual standards, as the whole thing could easily unravel if someone checked. Amy flew off to her conference, and we immediately started packing and moving our things to our new home, where Sophie and the kids had moved a month earlier. The Balinese god of vengeance, if there is such a thing, was really smiling down on me. The same night Amy arrived, Agung volcano, an active volcano in Bali, began erupting in full force, spewing clouds of volcanic dust into the air. All air travel in and out of Bali was immediately suspended. Her lover stayed home, and Amy was stuck in Bali alone to celebrate their wedding anniversary. This is impossible to make up. I laughed so hard I almost peed my pants. The volcano continued to erupt and all flights were still canceled. Separating the lovers behind the scenes, I checked her emails and messages every day to amuse myself. The lovers were not happy, and Amy was very resentful of Dan, as if it was his fault. Every once in a while, Amy would call home and tell me how busy she was at a conference, and blah, blah, blah. Typically, I would ask her how things were going at the hotel and ask questions about the city she was supposedly in. When I later gained remote access to her laptop, it turned out that during the phone call, she had been frantically searching the internet for information to come up with plausible answers. Meanwhile, all 6 of us were settling into our new home. I had my attorney file a separation document with the family court. I also obtained temporary custody of my girls from the court after filing their signed statements that they wanted to live with me. As the day of Amy's return approached, all flights were canceled, and I wondered how Amy would handle the situation. She called me one evening and told me that she had made a lot of connections with potential big sales leads at the conference, and her boss had asked her to follow up with them right away before she returned home. I could tell she was very nervous. It's also a good thing she didn't call on the video link, or I wouldn't have been able to contain myself. I just assured Amy that we were fine, and I understood. Another week went by, and she was still stuck in Bali. I saw frantic emails and texts between the 2 lovers. Her boss informed everyone at work that she had to extend her vacation due to a family emergency. Her boss also called me and deeply apologized for causing Amy to be away from home for so long. But it was a big opportunity vital to the company, blah, blah, blah. I waited for his call and was ready to answer, like a dutiful husband to an important working wife. I assured him that I was fine and understood. I then innocently asked him where Amy was going. He began to quickly think of places. I read Amy his letter, letting her know where she needed to be. My strategy, of course, was to make her squirm and plant the seeds of doubt in her mind that she had been discovered. I kept assuring my wife when she called that I understood everything, but kept asking her about interesting places in the cities where she was staying. I knew she had researched everything beforehand, so I always asked her a few unexpected trick questions and enjoyed her attempts to give herself away. I was just playing dumb. During one call, I said, "Hey, Amy, did you read about those poor people who are stranded in Bali and can't get home because of the volcano?" There was a moment of silence. Then she replied, "Oh, yeah, but I didn't pay much attention to it on the news. One of my coworkers was stuck there for 2 weeks. Do you remember Paul Howard and his wife? We met them about 6 months ago." "Oh, yes. We're working on a project together, and he has to do his part of the work remotely via the internet from his hotel in Nusa Dua. At least the Grand Hyatt isn't a bad place to be stuck." Amy's squeak was heard on the line. Sure enough, it was the hotel she was staying at. Paul hadn't even been to Bali, but she didn't know that. Immediately after the call, she'd moved to a cheap hotel on the other side of the island. She must have prayed she could get away with it. Of course, my 5 girls and son thought the whole farce was hilarious. Yes, Sophie's children were mine now. Finally, after almost 3 weeks, the volcano stopped erupting and flights from Bali resumed. Amy called me to tell me that her work was over and she would be back on Friday afternoon. I was waiting for her at the airport at our rented and now vacant house. I'd planned this meeting very carefully. When she walked in, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She looked tired and very nervous. Oddly enough, for someone who had been on a business trip for 3 weeks, she had a deep tan. I didn't bother with the usual kiss on the cheek. "Wow, you got a great tan on your business trip. Did you even have time to do anything?" She babbled something, blushing. "Sit down and have a glass of wine with me." I poured wine into my glass and took a sip. "Alan, I'm tired. I just want to go upstairs, take a shower, and rest before dinner." "I'm sorry, but we have something to discuss and it can't wait, so please sit down. The girls are staying the night at a friend's house, so we won't be disturbed." The look on Amy's face expressed genuine fear. She thought her game was finally over and I was about to lower the boom, but she didn't know how to handle it. She reluctantly sat down and I poured her a glass. I'd rehearsed this speech many times and honed the apologetic face. "You know things haven't been smooth between us for a long time, Amy. Do you know why?" She looked startled and only mumbled a "no." "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, Amy, but I can't sugarcoat it. The truth is that I've met another woman. I love her and I want to be with her. That's why I've decided to leave you to be with her." A sudden shock struck her, and the frightened expression on her face was replaced by wordless rage. I continued, still apologizing. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It's just that you were away so often and I got lonely." "How dare you do this to me, Alan? After all I've done for you? Who is she? I assume you're entertaining her, blah, blah, blah." I just sat there with a sorrowful face while she poured out her anger on me for about 5 minutes. "I can see that you're very angry, and that's understandable. It's pointless to continue the conversation now. I'll come back tomorrow around 4 o'clock in the afternoon to talk some more. We have a lot to discuss." I left her tirade and walked back to my new home. A string of angry text messages and voicemails followed me, but I didn't bother to respond. Back home, everyone was wondering how it went. My response, even better than expected. For dinner, we had pizza and watched a movie together. The girls turned off their phones to avoid communicating with their mother, even though I made it clear to them that they could not cut off contact with her. Why didn't I attack her for her cheating? Because it would have hurt her so much more that way. That night, Sophie and I made tender love, and all my anxiety and tension just melted away. Amy who? The next afternoon, I showed up at my old place armed with a folder of papers. I was greeted by a still very annoyed Amy along with her best friend, Claire, a lawyer I had never liked. I saw old emails where Claire had encouraged Amy to continue the affair. In the early days, when Amy was feeling guilty and thinking about breaking up, I sat down at the table facing both of them. Claire appeared to be the spokesperson, and offense was the best form of defense. She proceeded to tell me at length what a prick I was and what a wonderful wife and mother Amy was, how I had taken advantage of her while she was away and worked so hard for the family, how I should beg her to come back. If I didn't, she would clean me out in the divorce, take the girls, and I would never see them again. What hypocrites! After last night, they apparently decided that if I knew about her affair with her boss, I would have brought it up. I kept a sad, apologetic, and questioning look on my face.
Amy, I realize how much this hurts you, but I guess I'm a little
Surprised that you're so angry. For quite some time, I haven't felt like you really loved me. You've been physically and emotionally absent from our marriage for the last 3 years. That's utter nonsense, Alan. Of course I've been around. I know I work hard, which often distracts me from my work, but I did it for us.
So tell me, Amy, when was the last time we made love? Amy remained silent. I can tell you it was 3 years ago. Yes, we have physical engaging very rarely, but I was talking about making love. I can tell you the exact date of the last time. Remember 3 years ago? You were away on a business trip and forgot to call Emma on her 11th birthday. She tried to call you several times throughout the evening but never got through. She was so upset. I remember it well because Emma's birthday was 2 weeks ago when you were on a business trip and you forgot to call her again. So I thought it was a bad anniversary for us. She threw me a guilty look. Ever since you came home from that trip 3 years ago, somehow our relationship has never been the same. I realized from the look on their faces that I had hit the mark. They looked very uncomfortable and squinted at each other. After all, Amy, we've been sleeping in separate bedrooms for about 6 months now. It doesn't seem to bother you. I can't remember the last time we went out together or went on vacation. It feels like you spend your vacations at work. They both shuddered. When you're home, you're not here with me and your girls. I smiled inwardly as I watched them squirm in their seats. Anyway, Amy, I'm sorry, but I'm going to move on with my life, and I hope for the girls' sake we can make our separation as easy as possible. Reconciliation is really impossible. Who is she? Do I know her? You've met her daughter, Callie, Emma's best friend, a few times. Her mom, Sophie, and I met at Saturday soccer last year and became friends. I think our friendship grew until we realized we were in love with each other. We had an affair and recently decided to move in together. Before they could say anything else, I placed a large index folder on the table. I've gathered some documents and information for you. Tab A is the separation agreement I filed with the court 2 weeks ago. Tab B is the divorce petition you need to sign. The sooner you sign, the sooner we can move forward. Tab C is the proposed financial settlement. Tab D is the new lease on this house. The lease expires in 3 weeks, so you will have to renew it in your name if you want to stay. Tab E contains all the utility contracts. I gave notice to terminate the agreements in 3 weeks. If you want to stay, you will have to renew them in your name. Tab F has the bank statements. I have withdrawn 60% of the funds from our joint accounts. The credit cards in your name now belong to you. Finally, Tab G is a temporary court order for custody and child support. The girls have decided to move in with me, so custody will be handled by me. Child support will be paid directly from your paycheck at work. Access to visitation has been left open so we can work this out as we see fit. They were stunned that I was so well prepared. Claire began, "You creep. You've been planning this for ages. You're not going to get away with this. We're going to take your IT company, your girls, and your money." Well, yeah, I've been planning this since Christmas. I had an epiphany at your staff Christmas party, Amy. I realized it was over between us, and it was time to act. I watched Amy frantically trying to remember what had happened there. "So selling the house to buy another was a sham," Claire said. I only smiled. "As for screwing me, Claire, I don't have a company to take over. I closed it down a few months ago. I work for someone else now. I bought a new house for Sophie to live in after I filed for legal separation, so it's not an asset to our marriage. Since I have legal custody of the girls, I can use 60% of the money from the sale of the house to buy a new home. So, I'm not sure what you can really do, Claire. By the way, if you research state laws, you'll find that once the children turn 14, they can choose who they want to live with. They chose me. You really are nothing, Alan. I bet you poisoned the girls' minds against Amy. I wouldn't do that. I'm not such a scoundrel anyway. Even if I thought I should poison them, it wouldn't have been necessary. Amy did it herself, having neglected them for the last 3 years. You have a lot of work to do with them, Amy, to get them back. It's important for their well-being that they have a good relationship with their mother. She hasn't neglected them. She's a good mother. It's not what they think, Claire. She's been virtually absent from their lives for years. Amy, ask yourself, who feeds them? Who takes them to sports? Who makes their school lunches? Who helps them with their homework? Who buys them clothes? Who always remembers their birthdays and buys them presents? Who goes to the movies with them? Who do they go to with problems? Who helped them get through their first period? Who gives them love and affection? I could go on and on. Well, Amy fell silent. It was obvious that she was having a hard time digesting what had happened. The girls asked me to see if you would meet them tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the beachside cafe. It was actually my idea. Since they really don't want to meet you, I'll tell them it's okay. She only nodded. I left them both and went back to my family. The next day, the girls told me that Amy kept bad-mouthing me and demanding that they live with her. Eventually, the girls excused themselves to go to the bathroom and just quietly left. I couldn't understand why she wanted to make up. She had been indifferent to me for years. Maybe I was just a convenient babysitter and housekeeper for her.
When Alan told me he was leaving for another woman, I was in complete shock. I thought he loved me. Despite several attempts to reconcile, he wanted nothing to do with me, and we only communicated when exchanging our daughters for visits. My girls were openly hostile, making visits unpleasant. They would happily run to their new stepmother, which infuriated me. Eventually, I told them not to come unless they wanted to. I had envisioned my life continuing as it had, my lover on the road and my husband at home. Alan leaving was a huge shock and emotional blow. Over time, I realized he was right. I had been an absent wife, focusing all my love and emotional energy on Dan for the last 3 years, leaving almost nothing for Alan. It was surprising he stayed as long as he did. Unable to afford my house and child support, I moved into a tiny apartment, spending nights alone watching TV and eating takeout. Dan's attitude changed when Alan left me. He became too busy with his family to spend time with me, sending me on business trips alone and saying I could handle the clients. Our emotional connection faded. 6 months after my marriage ended, Dan announced he was moving to another city for a new job. Tearfully, I asked him to never contact me again. Suddenly, I was a divorced woman. I couldn't help but think of the line from a Joni Mitchell song, "You don't know what you've got until it's gone." I foolishly thought I could have it all. Alan was now with a beautiful woman who was impossible to hate, and he was glowing with happiness, just like he was when we were young parents. My girls were much happier too, treating Sophie as their mother and seeing me as an annoying relic of their past. It was very painful. I hit rock bottom when I complained to my girls about my situation, and Lauren looked at me coldly. "So, did you leave your father after all?" I know I wasn't the perfect wife and was neglectful, but he left me for another woman. "Mom, he left you because you had an affair with your boss for 3 years. The look on my face said it all. I was so ashamed. Alan had known all along but hadn't said anything. My life was a mess. I had lost a good husband and my daughters. True to his word, Alan advised our girls to keep in touch with me. Gradually, they began visiting willingly and sometimes stayed overnight. One evening, as I drove the girls to their new home, I asked Alan for a chat. We got out of the car and I faced him. "Lauren told me you know about Dan and me. I'm really sorry, Alan. You were a good husband and you didn't deserve this. I was selfish and got what I deserved." He nodded. "Why didn't you tell me you knew, Alan? Maybe you could have stopped me in time." By the time I found out, it was too late. "When did you find out?" "I caught you with your boss at the office Christmas party last year. After that, I did some digging and found out everything. I have to admit it amused me when you were stuck in Bali alone." "Oh, God, I feel miserable. Why didn't you confront me?" "I was angry and wanted you to feel my resentment. I found out you're not the first secretary your boss has slept with. He has a history of using and dumping women. I decided the best way to punish you was to stay quiet and let things unfold. If I made a scene, his wife might divorce him, freeing him to be with you. I figured you'd feel worse if you thought I left you for another woman." "Your strategy worked perfectly. My life is a mess. I'm sorry you were hurt so badly." "Well, a little sorry." "You don't need to apologize. It was my fault. If you had done what I did, I would have walked away from you. Looking back, I was seduced by excitement and became dependent to it. I tried to stop early on, but it was too late. I became obsessed and forgot about you and our girls for a while." "My anger has subsided, Amy, and I forgive you. I've also become philosophical about it. After all, I wouldn't be with Sophie now if you hadn't cheated on me." "Yes, I know. That's what hurts the most. Our marriage was challenging from the start, Sophie. I don't think you're a bad person. You made a big mistake, but he was a skilled manipulator. You didn't have a chance to fully mature and experience normal teenage life, including dating and figuring out who you wanted to be with. You were vulnerable, and your boss took advantage. You're probably right, Alan. But why did you have to tell the girls about him? It was too harsh. No wonder they hated me. I didn't tell them, Amy. They found out themselves. What? They came back to our old house unexpectedly and caught you both in the living room. Remember? Just after we moved out? I couldn't recall at first. Then the memory hit me with horror. What did they see? Pretty much everything, even Emma. Lauren described it to me in detail. My body tensed with shame, and I burst into tears, leaning into Alan's comforting embrace. He held me tightly, consoling me as I sobbed into his chest. Eventually, he carried me inside and laid me on the couch. Sophie and everyone else were kind and supportive, urging me to stay and join them for dinner. Seeing Alan happy with his new family, I felt the weight of my mistakes. As I walked out to the car that evening, he put both hands on my shoulders. Amy, don't keep blaming yourself. We faced challenges from a young age, becoming parents and committing to each other. Our marriage lasting 14 years is a testament to both of us. Look at the positives. Our mistakes brought us 2 wonderful daughters, a legacy that can never be taken away. You're right, Alan. Speaking of mistakes, I've made another. Sophie is pregnant, so we're getting married sooner than planned. You seem prone to mistakes. You're a good man and a good husband, Alan. Better than I deserved. I wish you well. I hugged him and kissed his cheek before leaving, feeling regretful.
Why did I forgive her so easily? For several reasons. Because holding on to hate can consume you and embitter you. Because she was enduring a form of punishment just by seeing me with Sophie. There was still a lingering bond between us, despite everything. Although I initially wanted to punish Amy, my true revenge was aimed at her boss, Dan, who had seduced her away from me. I hacked into his computer and sent him an email disguised as Amy, containing a hidden Trojan horse that granted me full access. I uncovered evidence that he had been embezzling from his former and current employers. I gathered substantial proof and anonymously sent it to both companies and the authorities. At his trial, he pleaded guilty and received a 7-year prison sentence. Throughout the trial, his wife stood by him, but after I showed her incriminating evidence of his numerous affairs, she ended their relationship on the spot. To complete my revenge, I visited Dan in prison. Initially, he didn't recognize me. Hi, Dan. We've met before. I'm Amy's ex-husband. What the hell do you want, prick? To deliver a message. The first one is from Amy. She sends her regards and hopes you're enjoying your new accommodations, which I helped you settle into personally. What? You really should have hired professionals to encrypt your computer. It took me only 15 minutes to unlock everything after I hacked into it. I couldn't resist forwarding it all to the police. After he finished cursing at me, I continued. Also, I hope you don't mind, but I paid a visit to your wife and showed her all those compromising photos and videos I've found of you and your mistresses. Needless to say, she was livid. She insisted on getting even, and I couldn't refuse. I don't understand why she wasn't enough for you. Nonsense. She wanted me to show you these. I spread the photos out in front of him. They had been doctored with Photoshop, but he didn't know that. She said to tell you that she'll never visit you here again, and you'll never see your children. I gave her the name of my lawyer who will handle her divorce from your sorry bum. The expression on his face was priceless. Yes, revenge is indeed a dish best served cold.